Before humans built houses, before doors could be closed, before a small switch could fill a room with light, the human body learned to live beside a boundary it could not control. Daylight gave shape to the world. It showed faces, paths, trees, water, smoke, and distance. But night quietly took those things away, leaving the same land strangely unfinished. In that darkness, perhaps the danger was not only animals or cold or unseen movement, but the sudden loss of knowing where the human body belonged. So why ancient humans feared the night more than predators? A human being can know a place very well in daylight, and still feel uncertain inside it after dark. The same ground remains beneath the feet, the same trees stand in the same places, the same stones, water, paths, and shelters have not moved. Yet when light disappears, the mind does not receive the world in the same way. Edges soften. Distance becomes harder to measure. A branch that was harmless in the afternoon becomes a dark shape without a clear name. A hollow in the earth, a slope of grass, a line of bushes, a low rock near the path, all become less certain than they were only hours before. This is one of the quietest changes in human experience, and one of the oldest. Darkness does not need to add anything new to the land. It only needs to remove enough detail for the land to become unfinished. For ancient humans, this unfinished world mattered more than it does for us now. Today, a person can wake in a dark room and reach for a lamp, a phone, a door handle, a wall. The space has already been measured and built by other people. The floor is flat. The roof holds. The bed does not move. Even when the room feels strange, it is still contained. But for most of human existence, night arrived over open ground, forest edges, caves, riverbanks, rocky shelters, grasslands, cold air, insects, animals, and other people whose safety depended on staying near one another. There were no switches to return the world in an instant. There were no glass windows holding the outside away. There were no streets fixed in straight lines, no bright corners, no walls that turned the unknown into something manageable. When daylight faded, the human body had to remain inside a world that could no longer be fully read. This may be one reason the night carried a weight that was deeper than the fear of a single animal. A predator, dangerous as it was, could sometimes be seen, heard, tracked, smelled, avoided, remembered, or understood through signs. But darkness changed the whole field of signs. It touched every direction at once. It made near things uncertain and far things almost disappear. It weakened the small agreements between the eyes and the ground, between memory and place, between the body and the path it thought it knew. A person who had crossed a clearing many times in daylight could hesitate at the edge of it after sunset, not because the clearing had changed, but because the information had thinned. The body still needed to move, drink, return, listen, protect children, stay warm, and remain close to the group. But the world no longer offered itself clearly. In that sense, night did not simply cover danger, it covered meaning. This is important because early human life depended on reading environments with care. Long before cities or farms, human survival was tied to attention. The color of the sky, the direction of wind, the freshness of tracks, the sound of water, the shape of clouds, the movement of birds, the smell of smoke, the slope of land, the distance to shelter, the closeness of other bodies. Human beings were not the strongest animals on the landscape. They survived by noticing relationships. A broken twig could mean passage. A disturbed patch of soil could mean recent movement. A certain silence could mean that something had changed nearby. Daylight made many of these signs available. It allowed the world to be compared with memory. It let a person say, without words perhaps, "This path is familiar. That tree is known. That rock marks the way back. That opening leads toward water. That ridge means we are near the place where people sleep." Night took this system and loosened it. The body could still remember, but memory had fewer shapes to attach itself to. The land was still there, but it no longer answered as clearly. Or a creature whose safety depended on reading place. This was not a small inconvenience. It was a change in the basic relationship between the human body and the world around it. The fear of night, then, may have begun not only as fear of what might be hiding, but as fear of losing the ability to know. The first human beings did not need to imagine monsters in order for darkness to matter. They only needed to stand at the edge of a familiar place and realize that familiarity itself had become weaker. The same world remained, but it had become harder to trust. The path back to the group was less visible. The distance to shelter was less certain. The line between safe ground and unsafe ground was no longer clean. In daylight, the world could be held by the eyes. In darkness, the body had to hold more of it from memory, sound, touch, and caution. That older condition has not completely vanished from us. Even now, when a room goes dark, the mind may briefly ask where the edges are, where the door is, what made that sound, whether the body is alone. The modern room is not the ancient landscape, but the question inside the body is old. When light is gone, how much of the world can a human being still trust? In daylight, the human body does not only see objects, it sees relationships. A path is not just ground, it is a way back. A tree is not only a tree, it may be a marker near water, a place where birds gather, or a point that helps the mind measure distance. A slope is not only a slope, it tells the feet how much effort will be needed, whether the ground may be loose, whether a person can carry something across it, or whether a child can pass safely. Light gives the body a quiet map before movement begins. It lets the eyes reach ahead of the feet. It lets the mind prepare for a step before the step is taken. This is so ordinary that modern people barely notice it. We move through rooms, across streets, along paths, and around furniture because vision constantly gives small promises about where the body can go next. Ancient humans lived by that same promise, but the promise was more fragile. Their ground had not been flattened, paved, fenced, or made predictable. The world before houses and roads was full of uneven surfaces. Stones hidden under grass, roots rising from soil, wet clay near water, loose gravel, sharp edges, animal holes, thorny plants, sudden dips, fallen branches, and slopes that changed after rain. In daylight, these things could be read. In darkness, many of them became guesses. This made night more than a visual problem. It made night a problem of movement, balance, memory, and trust. A person standing upright on 2 feet has certain advantages. The head is lifted high, the hands are free, the eyes can scan across distance. The body can carry food, tools, firewood, or a sleeping child. But walking upright also means that the body depends on small corrections. Each step is a quiet agreement between the eyes, the inner ear, the muscles, the feet, and the ground. The body needs to know where weight will land. It needs to feel that the next surface will hold. During the day, this agreement is supported by light. At night, the agreement becomes weaker. A route that would have been avoided easily can catch the foot. A stone that would have looked harmless can twist the ankle. A shallow hollow can feel like empty space. The fear that rises in such a moment is not imaginary. It comes from the body realizing that the world is still there, but the body no longer has enough information to move through it with the same confidence. For early humans, this mattered deeply. A fall was not just a fall. A damaged foot, a cut hand, or a twisted knee could change a person's ability to gather food, carry tools, keep up with others, escape danger, or help protect children. In a small group, injury was not only a private event, it became part of the group's burden. The night made every ordinary movement carry more consequence. To cross a few steps away from the fire, to reach for water, to move closer to another body for warmth, or to check on a child, the body had to enter a space it could not fully inspect. This is why darkness could feel larger than any one animal. It did not wait at one point. It surrounded every movement. It turned the safest path into a question, and the nearest object into an uncertain shape. The oldest human environments were living places full of signs, textures, smells, sounds, and changes. Daylight helped the mind sort these signs into a usable world. It separated branch from animal, shadow from hollow, path from brush, shelter from open land. It allowed human beings to connect what they were seeing now with what they remembered from before. We are creatures who build meaning from repeated places. We return to water. We remember where food once grew. We notice where animals pass. We learn where the ground stays dry. where wind enters, where fire can be protected, where a group can rest. But when night arrived, many of these remembered places lost their clear edges. The river could still be heard, but not fully seen. The shelter could still be near, but not as easy to judge. The path could still exist, but the eyes could no longer hold it from beginning to end. The same human body that could read tracks in dust, choose stones for tools, carry embers, recognize faces, and remember paths across seasons could become much smaller when the light was gone. Not smaller in bone or muscle, but smaller in reach. The body's world contracted to the circle it could hear, feel, or faintly see. Darkness does not erase the world. It narrows the part of the world that a human body can safely believe. The first fear of night was not necessarily the fear of teeth in the dark. Teeth belonged to an animal. An animal could sometimes be understood. It might leave tracks near mud, a smell near a carcass, a sound in dry grass, or a pattern that returned with hunger, season, or territory. But darkness was different. It did not stand in one place. It did not have one body. It did not move through the land like a single creature that could be watched from a distance. When night arrived, it changed the whole condition of knowing. It made the familiar less complete. It turned the open world into a place where every direction had to be guessed more carefully. A human group could fear a predator and still know what kind of fear it was. But the fear of darkness was wider, slower, and more difficult to hold in the mind because it came from the loss of certainty itself. This is why the night could feel heavier than a dangerous animal. A predator was a threat inside the world. Night changed the world that held every threat. It made the ground less readable, the trees less separate, the distance less trustworthy, and the body less certain of what it could do next. For ancient humans, this loss of certainty was not a poetic feeling. It touched survival at the level of ordinary decisions. Should someone move closer to the fire? Should someone go toward the sound of water? Should a child be lifted and carried? Should the group stay where it is, or shift position before the cold deepens? Should a person follow a noise, ignore it, wake others, or remain still? These are not dramatic choices when imagined from a modern room, but in a prehistoric landscape, each small choice depended on reading the world with limited information. The human body did not have claws, armor, night vision like many nocturnal animals, or the raw speed of many hunters. Its strength was partly in cooperation, memory, tools, attention, and the ability to connect signs. Darkness weakened that connection. It did not make humans helpless, but it made every judgment thinner. What had been a usable landscape in daylight became a field of partial evidence. A sound might be a branch, it might be an animal, it might be another person, it might be nothing important at all. The problem was not only the sound, the problem was that the mind could not complete it. This unfinished information is one of the deepest reasons night could become frightening. The brain is not comfortable with blank space when the body may be vulnerable. It tries to complete what the eyes cannot confirm. In daylight, a shadow can be checked, a movement can be followed, a path can be compared with memory. At night, the mind may have to respond before it knows enough. Waiting for certainty is peaceful only when the cost of waiting is low. For early humans, the cost could be high. A delayed reaction might mean losing heat, losing the group's position, stepping badly, missing a warning sign, or allowing fear to spread through a small camp. So the body leaned toward caution. It listened too closely. It gave weight to small changes. It treated uncertainty as something worth respecting. That does not mean ancient humans lived in constant terror. They also knew the night as a regular part of life. They slept, gathered near warmth, watched the sky, listened to insects, heard wind in grass, and learned patterns across many generations. But even a familiar night remained different from day. It reduced the world to fragments. The face of a companion might be visible only near firelight. The edge of shelter might fade into shadow. The open land beyond the group might still be known by memory, but not fully present to the senses. Human beings began in places where survival depended on remaining connected to land, group, season, and signs. Night weakened those connections all at once. This is why the darkness itself could become the larger presence. It was not simply a curtain hiding predators. It was a condition that made all possible dangers harder to separate from one another. A predator could be feared because it might come close. The night could be feared because it made closeness, distance, safety, and danger harder to measure. In that older world, the most frightening thing may not have been what waited beyond the fire, but the quiet realization that the body no longer knew enough to name it. In daylight, the human body becomes larger than its skin. The eyes reach outward before the hands do. They touch the path ahead without touching it. They measure the space between stones, the bend of a branch, the wetness near a riverbank, the distance between one person and another. A person standing in light can feel the world before entering it. The body can decide where to step, where to turn, where to slow down, where to avoid. This quiet expansion is so natural that it is almost invisible to us. We think of the body as ending at the fingertips, but in daylight, the body almost continues through vision. It extends into the path, into the clearing, into the next few moments of movement. For ancient humans, that extension mattered every day. A body that could see ahead could choose safer ground, notice a change near the edge of a shelter, recognize the outline of a companion, or understand that a dark line in the soil might be a track, a route, or a crack. Light gave the body time. It turned reaction into preparation. It allowed movement to begin before danger came close. When night arrived, this wider body shrank. The legs were still strong. The hands were still useful. The ears still listened. The memory of the land still remained. But the reach of the eyes became shorter, and with it the body's reach into the future became shorter as well. A person could no longer see far enough to prepare in the same way. The next step became more important than the next path. The nearest sound became more important than the distant ridge. The small circle around the body became the main world, while everything beyond it turned into uncertainty. This is one reason darkness could feel so different from daylight. It did not merely make the world black, it made the body live closer to itself. The open distance that had belonged to vision in the day was taken away. The human form, upright and watchful, was well suited to seeing across space when light was present. Standing on two legs lifted the head above grass, stones, shrubs, and the bodies of others. It helped early humans scan a landscape, carry tools, bring food, hold a child, and move with hands free. But those same advantages depended heavily on knowing what surrounded the feet. Upright walking is not careless movement. It is a constant balancing act, a series of small corrections made so quickly that the mind rarely notices them. The feet need information from the ground. The eyes help guide the next shift of weight. The muscles answer. The inner ear helps keep the body aligned. In light, this system can feel smooth. In darkness, the system must work with less certainty. A small, uneven place in the soil can become a threat to balance. A branch lying low across a path can become invisible until the foot meets it. A slope that looked gentle in afternoon can feel strangely open at night, because the eyes can no longer hold its shape. For people whose survival began in rough landscapes rather than designed rooms, this shrinking of the body's reach was serious. To move poorly was to risk injury. To be injured was to fall behind, lose strength, need help, or place more pressure on the group. The fear of night may therefore have lived not only in the imagination, but in muscles, joints, feet, and breath. The body knew that it could still move, but it could not move with the same confidence. It had to become careful. It had to listen before stepping. It had to trust memory when vision gave too little. The ancient beginning of human life was not a world of smooth paths and reliable edges. It was a world where survival depended on reading small details in real time. Daylight made those details available. Darkness removed many of them, leaving the body to act with fewer warnings. This does not mean ancient humans were helpless after sunset. They learned the habits of places, the value of staying near others, the protection of fire, and the discipline of not wandering without need. But even skill does not make darkness into daylight. Skill only teaches the body how to live with less information. The person who walks slowly at night is not weak. The person is obeying an old truth. When the eyes cannot reach far, the whole body must become smaller, quieter, and more cautious. In that smaller world, fear was not always panic. Sometimes it was simply the body's way of admitting that the land had moved beyond its grasp. Human eyes are not useless in darkness, but they are not the eyes of a night hunter. They can adjust slowly when light fades. They can gather faint shapes from moonlight, starlight, firelight, and the pale edge of a sky that has not fully closed. But they do not turn night into day. They do not give a human being the same command of darkness that many nocturnal animals have. A cat, an owl, a fox, a hyena, or other animals active in low light may rely on eyes, ears, smell, whiskers, silent movement, or other adaptations that help them live inside the night more naturally. Humans entered the night differently. We carried memory, cooperation, tools, fire, and caution. We did not simply belong to darkness in the same way. This difference matters because fear often begins where the body reaches the edge of its design. In daylight, the human eye gives sharp detail, color, depth, facial recognition, distance, and the subtle reading of movement. It helps a person see whether fruit is ripe, whether skin looks sick, whether a stone has the right edge for cutting, whether a face is calm or tense, whether a path bends toward shelter or away from it. These are powerful abilities. They belong to a creature that depends heavily on visual knowledge. But in the dark, many of these abilities weaken. Color fades, edges blur, faces lose expression, distance becomes uncertain. Movement can be sensed before it is understood. A branch, a crouched animal, a shadowed rock, and a person sitting still can all become closer to one another in the mind than they would ever be in daylight. The eye still works, but the world it gives back is poorer, quieter, and less reliable. For ancient humans, this was not simply uncomfortable. It touched the foundation of how human beings survived. Long before written maps, lamps, fences, or permanent roads, people carried maps inside the body and memory. They knew where water had been found, where wood could be gathered, where animals passed, where the ground stayed dry, where a shelter faced the wind, where children could sleep near warmth, and where danger had once appeared. Much of that knowledge became useful through sight. The eye tied memory to place. It could say, this stone is the stone near the path, this tree is the tree before the slope, this open ground is the place where we crossed before. When darkness came, that link became weaker. Memory did not vanish, but it had fewer visible anchors. A familiar tree became only a dark vertical shape. A known path became an uncertain gap. A companion's face became a voice near the fire. The group could still recognize the place, but recognition had to work harder. There is a quiet humility in this. Human beings often imagine themselves as clever masters of the landscape, and in many ways they were remarkably adaptable. They learned to make tools, share knowledge, carry embers, plan movement, teach children, and remember places across seasons. Yet the human body remained a daylight body in important ways. Its strongest senses did not give equal power at all hours. When light fell, ancient people had to lean more heavily on sound, smell, touch, social closeness, and habit. A cough near the fire, a sleeping child shifting under a covering, the crackle of wood, the movement of wind through grass, the call of an animal beyond the camp, all became part of a different way of knowing. The night asked the body to stop trusting only the eye, but the eye had been the body's longest reach. Losing some of that reach made the world feel nearer and less certain at the same time. This is one reason the night could feel greater than a predator. A predator was dangerous because it had power. The night was dangerous because it reduced human power before anything arrived. It made the eyes less precise before the ears knew what they were hearing. It made the body more dependent on the group before any clear threat appeared. It turned the space beyond the fire into a place where the mind had to compare weak signals with old memories. This does not mean ancient people misunderstood the night. They likely knew its patterns with patience we rarely practice now. They knew phases of the moon, the feel of colder air, the sounds of insects, the difference between wind and movement, the comfort of another body nearby. But knowledge does not erase limitation. A person can know the sea and still respect deep water. A person can know winter and still feel the cold enter the hands. In the same way, ancient humans could know night and still feel the body become less certain inside it. The fear was not only in the imagination, It was in the dimming of the very sense that helped humans read the world most clearly. Walking on two legs gave human beings a remarkable view of the world, but it also gave the night a special power over the body. An upright body is lifted above the ground. It can look across grass, over stones, toward the edge of trees, along a riverbank, or into the open distance. The hands are free to carry food, hold tools, gather wood, lift a child, or steady another person. In daylight, this way of moving can feel like confidence. The head is high. The eyes travel far. The body seems to belong to a larger space than the feet alone. But the same upright body depends on a delicate trust between vision and ground. A four-footed animal has more points of contact with the earth. A human being, moving step after step on 2 feet, must constantly shift weight from one narrow support to another. Most of the time, this happens without thought. The body adjusts, corrects, leans, catches itself, and continues. Yet those corrections need information. The eyes help the feet before the feet arrive. The mind sees a stone and shortens the step. It sees a root and lifts the toes. It sees mud and shifts weight. It sees a slope and prepares the hips, knees, and ankles for the change. In darkness, that quiet preparation becomes weaker. The body still walks upright, but the ground no longer gives its answers early enough. For ancient humans, this was not a small discomfort. Their world was not built around the soft certainty of floors, stairs, paths, and walls. The places where human life began were uneven, changing, and alive with small hazards. Rain could soften soil, dry seasons could crack it, animals could leave holes or tracks that broke the surface, stones could roll underfoot, roots could twist across the path. A river edge could seem solid and then give way. In daylight, an experienced person could read much of this before stepping. At night, even familiar ground became less obedient to the eye. The fear that followed was not only fear of falling, it was the awareness that the body's balance had become more exposed. A twisted ankle could make a person slower, a cut foot could make walking painful. A bad fall could reduce the ability to carry, gather, escape, or keep pace with others. In a small group, one injured body could change the movement of everyone around it. This is one reason the night could feel heavier than a predator. A predator might be avoided by distance, by group awareness, by fire, by sound, by memory of where it had been seen before. But darkness entered the body's own movement. It made ordinary ground less certain. It turned walking itself into a careful negotiation. A person did not have to see an animal to become cautious. The body only had to sense that the next step was no longer fully known. This reaches back to something very old in human origins. Our ancestors did not survive by being perfectly adapted to one narrow world. They survived by becoming flexible, watchful, social, and able to move through different landscapes. Bipedal walking helped free the hands and widen the view, but it did not make the human body invulnerable. It created a body that could do many things well in daylight, then had to become quieter and more restrained when vision faded. The upright posture that helped humans scan the horizon during the day could not solve the problem of the unseen ground at night. This may be why darkness can make the body feel smaller even before fear becomes a thought. The shoulders lower, the steps slow, the hands reach outward, the ears listen harder, the whole body begins to ask the ground for permission. That question is not modern weakness. It is an old form of intelligence. A cautious body is a body trying to remain alive with incomplete knowledge. Ancient humans likely learned this through repeated nights, repeated movements, repeated mistakes, and repeated returns to the safety of others. They may have known which paths were safer near camp, which stones marked the way, where the ground dipped, where firelight reached, and where children should not wander. But knowledge did not remove the body's basic limit. When light was gone, the human form lost some of its reach. It could still stand, walk, carry, and remember, but every movement had to be made inside a smaller circle of certainty. The night did not need to attack the body. It only needed to make the ground less visible beneath it. A sound in daylight usually has a body. A crack in the branches can be followed by the sight of a bird lifting away. A rustle in the grass can be checked with the eyes. A footstep can be placed beside a person, an animal, or the movement of loose stones. Even when the sound is sudden, daylight often gives it a shape, a distance, and a cause. The mind can complete it. It can say, "That was only wind, that was water, that was someone moving near the shelter, that was an animal far away." But at night, sound becomes separated from shape. It arrives without a face. It enters the body before the world can explain it. A small snap of wood may seem close or far. A movement in leaves may be nothing or something. A call in the dark may come from a harmless animal, a hunting animal, another human being, or from a place the group cannot see. The sound itself may be brief, but the uncertainty after it can remain. This is where night begins to work on the mind differently from any visible danger. A predator, when seen, has size, direction, behavior, and distance. A sound in darkness has only possibility. For ancient humans, possibility could not be ignored. Their lives began in landscapes where listening mattered, but listening alone was never as complete as seeing and listening together. The ear is powerful because it can reach where the eye cannot. It can detect movement behind the body, beyond trees, outside the glow of fire, or through grass where vision fails. But hearing does not always give clear edges. It can warn without explaining. It can open a question and leave the body inside the question. In daylight, the mind can use sound as one sign among many. At night, sound may become the main sign, and that makes every small noise heavier. A dry leaf crushed under weight, a stone rolling down a slope, a bird suddenly going quiet, a child turning in sleep, wood shifting in a dying fire, wind passing through branches. Each sound has an ordinary explanation, and ancient people would have known many of them well. They were not foolish listeners. They likely understood their environments with patience and experience. But knowledge does not remove the problem of incomplete evidence. The body may know that most night sounds are not danger, while still preparing for the few that might be. This cautious listening reaches deep into human origins. Early humans were not built like animals that could simply dominate darkness with specialized senses. They survived by combining many limited strengths: sight, memory, cooperation, tool use, learned places, shared attention, and the ability to notice patterns. Sound was part of that pattern making. A repeated call could mark a time of night. A certain animal noise could reveal the presence of water, weather, or movement nearby. A sudden silence could matter as much as a sudden cry. But when the eyes could not confirm the meaning, the mind had to work in a different way. It had to hold several possibilities at once. That is a heavy thing for a vulnerable body. The sound may not be dangerous, yet the body cannot safely decide too quickly that it is harmless. This is why a small noise in the dark can feel larger than its physical size. It forces the mind to imagine the missing body behind it. The imagination here is not fantasy. It is a survival tool working with poor material. The mind asks what made that sound, where it is, whether it is moving closer, whether others heard it, whether the fire is strong enough, whether a child should be pulled nearer, whether stillness is safer than movement. These questions can rise before language, before careful thought, almost as a tightening in the chest or a pause in the breath. In a prehistoric camp, such listening may have passed silently from one body to another. One person lifts the head, another becomes still. The group does not need to speak for attention to spread. The night teaches bodies to borrow each other's alertness. A sound without shape can move through a group like a small change in weather. It does not need to become panic. It only needs to make everyone more awake. This makes the fear of night different from the fear of a predator. A predator is a possible answer. Night sound is often the question before any answer appears. It belongs to the space between hearing and knowing. That space may be short in time, but it is long inside the body. It is the moment when the land is present but unreadable, when the group is near but not fully safe, when the ancient human mind must decide how much meaning to give to something it cannot yet see. In that unfinished moment, darkness becomes more than absence of light. It becomes a place where sound has no shape, and the body must listen as if the world is speaking from behind a wall. The human brain is not a quiet receiver of the world. It does not wait patiently until every fact is complete. It predicts, compares, fills gaps, and prepares the body before certainty arrives. In daylight, this can feel almost effortless. A person sees a shape moving near the grass and quickly understands it as a bird, a child, a branch, or an animal crossing the path. The eyes give enough detail for the mind to correct itself. A first guess can be tested. A wrong guess can be softened by clearer evidence. But in darkness, the brain must do the same work with poorer material. A sound comes first. A shape may never appear. The distance is unclear. The direction may change as wind, stone, water, and trees bend the sound. The mind still has to answer, because the body cannot live without an answer. It must decide whether to stay still, wake another person, move toward the fire, reach for a tool, pull a child closer, or simply breathe and wait. This is where the night becomes more powerful than a visible threat. It forces the brain to act in the space before knowledge is complete. For ancient humans, this space before knowledge was not rare. It was part of living in open environments near animals, weather, hunger, cold, and other groups of people. A prehistoric night did not offer clean information. Firelight flickered. Shadows moved without meaning. Wind turned one sound into many sounds. A noise behind the body could seem closer than it was. A noise in front could seem to come from the side. The brain had to use memory, experience, and caution to decide what the senses could not fully prove. It may have asked, without words, "Have I heard this before? Does this sound belong to wind? Does it match an animal's movement? Did the group leave food nearby? Is the fire low? Is someone missing? Is the ground safe if I stand?" These questions show why fear was not simply a weakness. Fear could be a way of buying time. It held the body between action and stillness, while the mind searched for meaning. The beginning of human life was shaped by this kind of careful uncertainty. Our ancestors were not the fastest, strongest, or best equipped animals of the night. Their survival depended on reading patterns and sharing attention. One person's alertness could become useful to others. A head turning toward a sound could tell the group that something had changed. A body becoming still could spread caution without a word. In daylight, signs could be checked with the eyes. At night, signs had to be weighed. The brain could not afford to treat every sound as danger, because constant panic would waste energy and disturb sleep. But it also could not treat every sound as harmless, because one wrong dismissal might carry a cost. So the ancient mind lived between two errors. React too much, and the group loses rest. React too little, and a real threat may come too close. The night sharpened this balance. It made the brain more sensitive, not because the world was always dangerous, but because the evidence was thinner. This is also why the fear of night could last longer than the fear of a known animal. When an animal is seen, the mind can begin to measure it. How far away is it? Is it moving closer? Is it alone? Has it noticed us? Can fire, noise, group size, or distance reduce the danger? Even a frightening animal becomes part of a clearer picture once it has a form, but a sound without a form leaves the brain open. The mind must hold several worlds at once. In one world, the sound is only a branch falling. In another, it is a small animal passing. In another, it is a predator testing the edge of the camp. In another, it is a person outside the group. In another, it is nothing that matters, but no one can prove that yet. The body feels the weight of all these possible worlds before one of them becomes real. Modern people still know a softer version of this. A small noise in a house at night can feel larger than the same noise during the day, not because the house has changed, but because the brain has less information and more silence around the signal. For ancient humans, that condition was deeper, older, and tied to the open world itself. The mind that guessed too slowly might fail the body. The mind that guessed too strongly might exhaust it. Somewhere between those two dangers, human fear learned to listen into darkness before it understood what it was hearing. The most difficult sound in the dark is not always the loudest one. It is often the sound that does not finish itself. A heavy crash can wake the body, but it may also give the mind something clear to hold. A tree has fallen, a stone has shifted, a branch has broken under weight. The body may still be alarmed, but the sound has direction, force, and shape. A small sound is different. A soft scrape near the edge of a shelter, a brief movement in dry grass, a low breath that might be wind, a twig that breaks once, then nothing. These sounds do not complete the story they begin. They leave the mind standing in the space after them, trying to decide whether silence means safety or waiting. This unfinished quality may be one reason night worked so deeply on ancient human fear. It did not always present a danger. It presented the beginning of a possibility. In daylight, possibility can be narrowed quickly. The eyes check the ground. The group looks toward the source. A shape appears, and the mind adjusts. At night, the sound may remain alone. It may not return. It may not become visible. It may leave only a question hanging just beyond the firelight. For ancient humans, that question mattered because the body could not treat the unknown as empty. A landscape without clear information was still a living landscape. Animals moved through it, wind changed it, water shaped it. Other people might pass through it, fire might fade, children might shift in sleep. Someone might need to stand, move, or listen. The night did not need to prove that danger was present. It only needed to make harmlessness uncertain. That is a subtle difference, but it is a powerful one. Fear grows easily in the gap between a signal and its meaning. A predator, when visible, may be terrifying, but visibility gives the mind a boundary. It can see the body, the eyes, the direction, the speed, the distance. It can begin to compare the danger with the group's position, the fire's strength, the shelter's edge, the tools nearby. The danger becomes something that can be placed inside space, but a sound without shape does not stay in one place inside the mind. It spreads. It can become near and far at the same time. It can be small in the ear and large in the imagination. It can make the whole darkness feel occupied, even when nothing has moved again. This does not mean early humans were careless or superstitious. It means they were bodies living with incomplete evidence, and incomplete evidence has always asked the nervous system to lean toward caution. The origin of human life was not built around perfect knowledge. It was built around enough knowledge to survive until morning. A group did not need to know everything in the dark. It needed to know enough to keep the fire alive, keep bodies close, protect the young, avoid unnecessary movement, and notice when something had changed. In such a world, uncertainty itself became a force, not a spirit, not a myth, not a simple fear, but a condition pressing on the senses. The mind listened not only for danger, but for the meaning of danger. It listened for pattern. Was the sound repeated? Was it heavier than wind? Did it move with rhythm? Did it stop when people became still? Did animals nearby fall silent? Did another person hear it too? These small comparisons may have shaped the way human attention worked at night. A single listener was limited. A group could share uncertainty. One person heard from one side, another from another side. One remembered a similar sound from a previous place. Another knew the way dry branches cracked in cold air. Around a small fire or a sheltered space, fear could become organized attention. It could slow the body down, gather people inward, and prevent careless movement into a world that could not be fully seen. This is why the fear of night was not simply fear of an enemy. It was fear of the moment before the enemy was known, and also the moment before the harmless thing could be named harmless. The sound that had no shape made the brain carry several answers at once. It might be nothing. It might be weather. It might be an animal passing beyond concern. It might be a real danger at the edge of the group's safety. Until one answer became clear, the body had to live among all of them. In that quiet pressure, the night became more than darkness. It became a place where the mind kept reaching for a shape that had not yet appeared. A predator was not a simple danger, but it was a danger with a body. It had weight, hunger, habits, and limits. It moved through the world in certain ways. It left marks when the ground was soft enough to hold them. It might carry a smell. It might disturb birds, break grass, silence smaller animals, or appear again near water, carcasses, paths, or places where prey gathered. Ancient humans did not live in a world where animals were mysterious shadows all the time. They watched animals closely because watching animals was part of staying alive. They saw where herds moved, where scavengers gathered, where tracks crossed wet soil, where dung appeared, where bones were scattered, where certain sounds returned at certain hours. A dangerous animal could surprise them, and sometimes it surely did. But over many days, seasons, and generations, animals also became readable. They belonged to patterns. The night was different because it weakened the reading of all patterns at once. This is why the title's question is not only about fear of predators. It is about the strange difference between fearing a living thing and fearing the condition that makes every living thing harder to understand. A predator might be somewhere. Darkness was everywhere. A predator had direction. Night surrounded direction. A predator had a body that could, at least sometimes, be seen. Night removed bodies from certainty and replaced them with signs that were incomplete. For early humans, the difference mattered. If a lion, hyena, leopard, wolf, or other dangerous animal was known to pass near a place, the group could respond with learned caution. They could avoid certain areas, keep closer together, sleep where visibility was better, maintain fire when they had it, make noise, choose shelter, or leave before the risk grew. These actions did not guarantee safety. The ancient world was never safe in the modern sense, but the danger had some structure. It could be connected to place, behavior, season, smell, track, sound, and memory. That structure gave human beings something to work with. Human survival has always depended on turning the unknown into patterns. A track is not just a mark. It is a message from an animal that is no longer there. A repeated call is not just a noise. It is a sign that a certain life is moving nearby. A carcass is not only food or death. It may be a warning that other mouths will return. The human mind became powerful partly because it could link these signs across time. It could remember yesterday's danger in today's place. It could compare one valley to another, one season to another, one trail to another. But when night arrived, many signs lost their usefulness. Tracks could not be read well. Distance could not be judged clearly. The shape of an animal might become only a darker patch inside darkness. The smell of the land could still speak, and sound could still warn, but the whole system of evidence became thinner. The predator was still dangerous, but the darkness made the predator harder to separate from every other possibility. That may be why ancient humans could fear night more deeply than predators themselves. Not because predators were unimportant, but because predators were one kind of danger inside a larger uncertainty. A group could learn the ways of a dangerous animal. It could teach children where not to wander, when to stay close, how to read prints in mud, how to notice circling birds, how to avoid the edge of certain places after sunset. Across generations, such knowledge could become part of ordinary life. This is one of the oldest human strengths, the ability to carry survival information socially, not only individually. One person's experience could protect another. One elder's memory could shape where the group slept. One story about a past attack could change how people moved through a familiar landscape, but night pressed against that strength. It took knowledge that was visual, spatial, and practical, then made it harder to apply. The group might know the land, yet not see enough of it. It might know animals, yet not know whether the sound beyond the fire belonged to one of them. It might know the way back, yet not see the path clearly enough to trust it. The fear of a predator could be focused. The fear of night was spread out across ground, air, sound, memory, and waiting. This wider fear did not need to be dramatic. It could be quiet, steady, and patient. It could sit at the edge of a fire while people listened. It could live in the pause before a footstep, in the decision not to move too far, in the way a sleeping child was kept closer to an adult body. The ancient human mind did not fear night because it knew nothing. It feared night because it knew enough to understand how much could no longer be seen. A dangerous animal can be terrifying because it is alive, strong, and unpredictable in the moment. But over time, even dangerous animals become part of a pattern. They do not exist everywhere at once. They need water. They need food. They move through territories, rest in certain places, follow prey, avoid certain risks, and respond to fire, sound, numbers, and distance. Ancient humans, like many foraging peoples across the world, depended on careful attention to animal behavior. They did not need modern science to know that other living things had habits. They could notice where tracks appeared after rain, where scavengers gathered, where hoofed animals crossed open ground, where birds suddenly lifted from trees, where an odor in the air meant something had recently died. These signs did not make predators harmless, but they made them less completely unknowable. A creature with a pattern can be studied. A repeated danger can become part of memory. A place where trouble happened before can be treated differently the next time. This kind of learning is one of the deep human strengths. It turns fear into caution and caution into behavior. A group could avoid sleeping too close to a carcass. They could stay away from thick cover at certain hours. They could keep children nearer when moving through places where visibility was poor. They could choose higher ground, open ground, rock shelters, or places where sound carried better. They could use fire when it was available, not as a magical wall, but as heat, light, smoke, smell, and a gathering point that changed the behavior of humans and sometimes of animals around them. They could make noise together. They could move in groups rather than alone. They could teach young people not by abstract rules but through repeated experience. Do not wander there. Listen when the birds change. Stay near the others after sunset. Watch the ground near water. Remember what happened in this place before. In this way, predator danger became social knowledge. It did not belong only to the person who first encountered it. It could be carried by the group, shaped into habit, and passed forward. That does not mean ancient humans were always safe or always successful. It only means that a predator, however frightening, could be brought into the human system of signs. The larger problem of night was that it weakened that system at the exact time when people needed it most. A group may know where a dangerous animal has passed, but if the tracks cannot be seen, the knowledge becomes harder to use. A person may know which path returns safely to camp, but if the path has lost its edges, memory has to work without full support. Someone may recognize the smell of an animal, but without sight, the distance and direction remain uncertain. The group may have chosen its resting place well, but beyond the small range of firelight or moonlight, the land becomes less available to judgment. This is why night could feel more enclosing than the predator itself. The predator was one possible danger. Night reduced the clarity of all possible answers. Human beings survived by combining many weak signals into a useful whole. One sign alone might be uncertain, but several signs together could become knowledge. A track, a smell, a broken branch, the direction of wind, the behavior of birds, and the memory of past movement could help form a picture. Darkness broke that picture into pieces. The ears might hear something, but the eyes could not complete it. The nose might catch a smell, but the ground could not be checked. The body might remember a safe route, but the feet could not trust every step. The mind still tried to build meaning, but it had fewer pieces to build with. For ancient humans, this meant that fear of night was not only fear of being hunted, it was fear of losing the very tools that made humans able to deal with being hunted. The eyes, the group's shared attention, the memory of landmarks, the reading of tracks, the practical knowledge of animal paths, all became weaker after dark. A predator could be respected, avoided, watched, and sometimes driven away. But night made respect, avoidance, watching, and action more difficult. It turned a learned landscape into a partial landscape. It made the old lessons harder to apply. In daylight, human beings could move through the world as pattern readers. In darkness, they had to become pattern readers with missing pages. That may be why the fear of night reached deeper than the fear of a single animal. It was not only the danger outside the group, it was the quiet reduction of the group's ability to understand what was outside. Night did not come from one direction. That may be the deepest difference between darkness and a predator. A predator had a place in the world even when it was hidden. It might be beyond the trees, near water, downwind, behind the rocks, or moving through grass. It could come closer, move away, circle, pause, or reveal itself through sound. However dangerous it was, it still belonged somewhere. Darkness did not belong somewhere. It arrived across the whole land. It filled the spaces between trees, the hollows in the ground, the distance beyond the fire, the air behind the body, the path ahead, and the place just outside memory. It did not need to choose a direction because it covered all directions at once. For ancient humans, this was not only frightening, it was disorienting. A danger with a direction can be faced, avoided, watched, or kept at the edge of awareness. A danger without direction changes the way the body feels inside the world. It makes behind, ahead, near, and far less stable. It asks the mind to divide attention everywhere, while the body can only look one way at a time. This is why the night could become larger than any animal inside it. The animal was a possible presence. The darkness was the condition that made every possible presence harder to place. A group could turn toward a sound, but the rest of the darkness remained. A person could stare beyond the firelight, but the back remained exposed to imagination. Someone could remember the path to water, but the darkened land around that path still held too many unanswered shapes. Human beings evolved as creatures of attention, but attention has limits. It can sharpen toward one point, or spread outward weakly across many points. Night forced attention to spread. The ears listened in several directions. The eyes searched for movement where there was almost no detail. The skin felt cold air and small changes in wind. The mind compared every new signal with memory. This kind of awareness could protect the group, but it also made the night feel endless. The fear did not always rise because something had appeared. It rose because nothing could be fully dismissed. This reaches back to the earliest human condition. Survival depended on narrowing uncertainty, but night widened it again. During the day, the world could be sorted into places of movement, places of rest, places of water, places of danger, places of shelter. The mind could place things into a usable order. At night, that order became less visible. The safe place was still safe only because people stayed close, remembered the ground, cared for the fire, and limited unnecessary movement. The open land beyond did not need to become hostile. It only needed to become unreadable enough to make confidence withdraw. In that way, darkness was not like a predator at all. It was more like a loss of agreement between the human body and the landscape. The body still wanted the world to answer clearly, but the world answered in fragments. A crack, a smell, a colder current of air, a moving shadow, a silence where insects had been. Each sign might mean little. Each sign might mean something. The mind could not know which signs deserved weight until more evidence arrived, and sometimes more evidence did not arrive. A predator could be frightening because it might attack. Night could be frightening because it made even waiting feel like an action. Staying still was a choice. Waking others was a choice. Letting the fire burn lower was a choice. Moving toward a sound was a choice. Doing nothing was also a choice. The darkness placed pressure on ordinary decisions and made them feel larger. For people living without permanent walls, without electric light, without a sealed room between the body and the outside, this pressure would have been woven into daily life. They did not need to think of night as mysterious in a modern dramatic sense. They only needed to understand that after sunset, the same land required a different body, a different mind, and a different kind of group attention. That difference may be the quiet answer waiting behind the question, though not a final answer yet. Ancient humans feared predators because predators could kill, but night may have been feared more deeply because it changed the whole field in which survival had to be understood. It did not bring one danger. It made every danger harder to separate from the dark that carried it. Fire did not make the night disappear. It changed the shape of the night. That difference is important. When a small fire burned near a group of ancient humans, it gave the body something the darkness had taken away. It gave a center. It gave warmth, glow, movement, and a place for eyes to return. Around firelight, faces could become visible again. Hands could work with more certainty. A child could be seen beside an adult. A stone tool, a piece of wood, a portion of food, a sleeping body, a gesture, a wound, a glance, all could be brought back into the human world. Fire gave detail where darkness had removed detail. It made the nearest space more understandable. It helped people gather close not only because of heat, but because light itself made closeness easier to trust. In the long beginning of human life, this was not a small change. Fire was one of the great human tools, but it should not be imagined as a complete victory over night. It was more like a small island of order inside a much larger dark. The land beyond the glow remained there. The trees, stones, water, animals, wind, and unknown distances did not vanish. They only moved farther away from certainty. Inside the firelight, the world had edges. Outside it, the world became less readable again. This may be why fire could comfort the body and sharpen unease at the same time. It protected the center, but it also made the border more visible. A person could see where safety seemed to end. The circle of light created a circle of attention. People near it could look at one another. They could recognize expressions, share food, care for children, repair tools, warm cold hands, and keep the group organized through the hours when movement was harder. Fire may also have helped deter some animals in some situations, and it certainly changed the sensory space around a camp through light, heat, smoke, smell, and sound. But no careful account of ancient life should turn fire into a wall that nothing could cross. Fire needed fuel. It could weaken. It could smoke in the wrong direction. It could be difficult to maintain in rain, wind, damp ground, or scarcity of wood. It depended on attention. It was powerful, but it was also fragile. A group gathered around fire was not outside nature. It was negotiating with nature through a living flame that had to be fed. That fragility matters because it brings us closer to the real human experience of night. The fear was not simply that something might come from the dark. It was also that the thing holding back the dark was temporary. A fire gave the body a reason to settle, but it also reminded the mind that safety had limits. The light reached only so far. The warmth reached only so far. Beyond that edge, the old uncertainty continued. In daylight, the landscape could be seen as continuous. The eye could move from the body to the path, from the path to the trees, from the trees to the distant slope. Firelight broke that continuity into a near world and a far world. The near world became human. Faces, tools, embers, breath, sleeping bodies, hands moving slowly. The far world became less human. Trunks without detail, ground without clear texture, sounds without visible source, movements that may or may not have existed. This division may have made the night feel even stranger. Fire did not only show things, it also showed how much remained unseen. In that sense, the first fires may have taught humans a new kind of boundary. Not a wall of stone or wood, but a boundary made of light. Inside it, the group could become more itself. People could share heat, remain close, and hold the night at a distance for a while. Outside it, the larger world remained unfinished. The body learned to rest near the flame, but not to forget the darkness beyond it. This is why fire belongs at the center of any question about ancient night. It did not remove fear, it organized fear. It gave fear a shape, a distance, and a place to gather around. The darkness was still vast, but now humans had a small glowing point from which to face it. The edge of firelight may have been one of the most important borders ancient humans ever knew. It was not a border built from stone, wood, or earth. It did not stand still like a wall. It trembled, moved, breathed, and changed with every piece of fuel placed inside it. Yet for the people gathered near it, that moving edge could divide the world into two very different spaces. Inside the glow, the body could return to some of its daylight habits. Hands could see what they were touching. Faces could be recognized. Food could be shared. A child's position could be checked. A wound, a tool, a sleeping body, a piece of wood, the expression of another person, all could be brought into human attention. Outside the glow, the same land continued, but it did not offer itself in the same way. The fire made a small world clear, and by doing that it made the unclear world beyond it feel even larger. This is one of the quiet paradoxes of fire. It gave safety, but it also created a visible line where safety seemed to weaken. A person sitting near a flame could see the ground in front of the feet, perhaps the hands of a companion, perhaps the shape of a shelter or rock wall nearby. But beyond the reach of light, the trees or open land became a darker mass. A movement beyond that edge might be real, or only the shifting of shadows. A sound might come from nearby, or from farther out. The eyes, drawn again and again to the same border, could not help noticing how small the bright circle was. Fire did not simply fight darkness, it measured darkness. It showed humans that their controlled space had an edge. For ancient people, this edge would have mattered not only emotionally, but practically. A group had to decide where to place bodies, tools, fuel, food, and children in relation to the flame. Too close, and heat, smoke, sparks, or shifting embers could become a problem. Too far, and the body lost warmth and visibility. The arrangement of a resting place was therefore not random. It was shaped by the limits of light and heat. People near the center could see each other more clearly. Those at the edge might be closer to the unknown. Fuel had to be close enough to reach, but not so scattered that someone needed to wander far into darkness. The fire's circle quietly organized the group. It made a small social world. Who was near, who was protected, who could watch, who could rest, who could tend the flame. In the deep history of human life, this kind of organization may have been as important as the fire itself. Fire was not only a tool held in the hand, it was a place-making force. Around it, night became arranged. The origin of human community was not only in hunting, speaking, making tools, or sharing food. It was also in the repeated act of gathering near limited safety. The flame created a center, and the center gave the group a way to face the surrounding dark, but the boundary remained fragile. A stronger wind could bend the smoke and make eyes water. Damp wood could burn poorly. Heavy rain could make fire harder to keep. A shortage of fuel could force a choice between staying warm now and conserving effort for later. Even when fire burned well, it did not extend very far. The edge of light moved over stones, grass, skin, and wood, then faded. Beyond that fading edge, the world did not become empty. It became less available. That difference may have been deeply felt by bodies that depended on reading the land. The fire restored a little vision, but it also focused attention on the place where vision stopped. A face inside the glow could feel calm. A shape outside it could not be named. A tool beside the body could be trusted. A sound beyond the circle could not be placed. This made the night feel divided. Human nearness on one side, unfinished space on the other. Modern darkness rarely gives us this border so clearly. Electric light floods rooms, corners, paths, and streets with a steadier reach. It hides the smallness of our safe spaces. But ancient firelight was honest about its limits. It did not pretend to own the night. No, it only opened a temporary room inside it, a room without walls, held together by heat, attention, memory, and the bodies of others. To sit beside such a fire was to feel both protected and reminded. The world had not gone away. It was waiting just outside the light. Fire gave ancient humans a center, but it did not give them possession of the night. This is the careful difference that matters. A flame can make a small circle visible. It can gather bodies close. It can warm hands, dry skin, cook food, and hold attention in one place. It can help a group recognize itself after the world has darkened. Yet fire does not push darkness away forever. It only opens a temporary space inside it. The night remains around the circle, above it, beyond it, behind every tree, across every slope, and inside every distance the light cannot reach. To imagine ancient people as having conquered the night because they used fire would make the story too simple. Fire was not conquest, it was negotiation. It was a fragile agreement between human care and a larger world that did not stop being uncertain. A fire had to be made, protected, fed, watched, and remembered. It could fade if people slept too deeply. It could die if rain soaked the fuel. It could scatter sparks if wind shifted. It could burn too low when the cold was strongest. It could create smoke that helped in one moment and troubled breathing or vision in another. It could comfort the body, but also demand labor from the body. Someone had to gather wood. Someone had to know what would burn. Someone had to decide whether the flame was worth feeding through the long hours or whether embers should be preserved carefully until morning. In this way, fire did not remove human vulnerability. It changed the form of it. Instead of being only vulnerable to darkness, people also became responsible for the small brightness that stood against darkness. This responsibility may have shaped the night as much as the flame itself. Near fire, ancient humans could build a small order. Bodies arranged close enough for warmth, children near adults, tools placed within reach, food kept where it could be watched, fuel gathered before darkness made gathering harder. But every part of that order depended on attention. The circle was not safe simply because it glowed. It was safe only while people maintained the conditions that made it useful. The fire had to remain in the right place, at the right size, with enough fuel, without becoming a danger to the bodies around it. Too weak, and it stopped helping. Too strong, and it demanded space, smoke, and caution. This is why fire belongs so deeply to the question of why the night was feared. It shows that ancient humans were not passive before darkness. They acted, they made centers, they used knowledge, they changed the sensory world around them. But the very need for fire reveals the scale of the problem. If night were only the absence of daylight, any glow would have solved it. Instead, fire gave a partial answer to a much larger uncertainty. The origin of human life was not a clean movement from fear to control. It was a long life inside limits. Early humans learned to make the world more livable without making it fully predictable. They did this with tools, memory, language, cooperation, and eventually with fire. But each solution created its own border. A tool extends the hand, but only where the hand can reach. A remembered path guides movement, but only if the place can still be recognized. A group gives safety, but only if people remain together. Fire gives light, but only until the edge of its glow. The night reminded humans of every border at once. It showed where human power ended. That may be why the flame was both comforting and humbling. It proved that humans could answer darkness, but only in a small, careful, temporary way. The land outside the circle did not disappear because people gathered near warmth. Animals still moved. Wind still changed. Cold still entered from the ground. Water still had to be found. The path back to daylight still had to be waited for. A person could sit beside the fire and feel the nearness of others, yet still know that the larger world had not been fully brought under human control. This small island of light may be one of the oldest images of human survival, not a victory over nature, but a shared pause within it. A place where hands could rest for a moment, where faces could return from darkness, where children could sleep closer to warmth, where memory and attention held the edge together. Ancient humans did not erase the night. They learned to live at its border, carrying a little light and knowing the dark was still there. A place to sleep is easy to misunderstand from the modern side of history. Today, sleep usually happens inside a room that has already done most of the work for the body. Walls hold back wind, a roof holds back rain, a door marks the difference between inside and outside. A bed lifts the body from the ground. Curtains, windows, locks, floors, and lamps turn the night into something arranged. Even when a person feels uneasy in the dark, the shape of safety is already built around them. For ancient humans, the place of rest was not like that. It may have been a rock shelter, a cave mouth, a protected hollow, a place near trees, a dry patch above water, a temporary camp in open land, or a chosen area where the group could gather with some protection from wind, cold, and danger. But it was rarely a sealed interior in the way modern people understand it. The sleeping place was not a separate world. It was a careful pause inside the same world that had to be watched by day. This makes the ancient night feel different. The group did not simply go indoors and leave the outside behind. They remained close to the outside, breathing the same air, hearing the same animals, feeling the same weather, and resting on ground that still belonged to the larger landscape. A modern house can make safety feel like a container. An ancient camp was more like a border. It gathered human bodies into a center, but the center did not have hard edges. Its protection came from position, memory, fire when available, other people, nearby shelter, chosen ground, and the decision not to spread too far apart. A person could be near the group and still hear the land beyond it. A child could be close to an adult and still be only a few steps from darkness. Tools could be within reach, but the world outside the reach of hands remained open. This is why the camp was not just a place. It was an arrangement of vulnerability. Human beings had to make safety out of bodies, objects, warmth, attention, and space. The earliest human resting places were shaped by practical needs. People had to consider dry ground, wind direction, access to water, fuel, visibility, animal movement, and the closeness of others. A place that felt safe in afternoon might feel exposed after sunset. A rock wall could protect one side, but leave another side open. A cave could shelter bodies, but it could also be cold, damp, smoky, narrow, or already used by animals at other times. Open ground could allow better visibility, but offer less cover from weather. Trees could break wind, but also make movement harder to see. Every place carried trade-offs. This is important because ancient fear was not only a feeling inside the mind, it was built into the way people had to choose where to stop. To rest was to decide that this place, among many imperfect places, would hold the group through the dark hours. That decision connected directly to the deep beginning of human life. Our ancestors survived not by finding perfect safety, but by repeatedly making partial safety. They used judgment. They remembered previous places. They noticed where ground stayed dry, where smoke could rise, where animals might pass, where children could remain close, where older or injured people could rest without being too far from warmth. The night turned these judgments into something heavier. In daylight, a camp could be seen as part of a wider landscape. At night, it became the main known space. The rest of the world receded. The few steps around the group carried more meaning. Where someone lay down mattered. Where fuel was placed mattered. Where the youngest slept mattered. Where the edge of firelight ended mattered. A camp was fragile because it had to be maintained by relationships. The group itself became part of the shelter. Bodies near one another held warmth. Awake ears extended the group's awareness. Shared memory helped define which sounds mattered and which could be ignored. A sleeping place was therefore not only a physical location, it was a social structure laid gently onto the ground. Without the group, the same place would be much weaker. Without attention, fire, memory, and closeness, the border between safety and the night would thin quickly. This helps explain why ancient humans could fear night more than predators. A predator might threaten the camp from outside, but night tested the camp's entire structure. It asked whether the chosen ground was good enough, whether people were close enough, whether the fire would last, whether children were warm, whether someone would wake if the dark changed. The camp was the human answer to night, but it was never a complete answer. It was a temporary border drawn by living bodies in a world that remained open. In an ancient resting place, safety was not a single object. It was a pattern made from many small things placed in relation to one another. A fire might burn near the center if fire was available. Around it, bodies could gather for warmth, light, and shared awareness. Tools might be kept near hands, not because every moment was dangerous, but because reaching for what is needed should not require wandering into darkness. Food, fuel, skins, fibers, stones, wooden objects, sleeping children, tired adults, and older bodies all had to find their place inside a limited space. The camp was not only where people stopped moving, it was where the group quietly arranged the night so the night would not arrange them completely. This is a deep human act. Long before permanent buildings, people made temporary order from ground, fire, memory, and closeness. They did not need walls for space to have meaning. A place could become more human because bodies returned to it, because ashes marked repeated use, because stones were placed, because tools were left within reach, because children learned where to stay, because elders remembered which side the wind came from. In such a place, safety was not separate from the group. The group itself was part of the architecture. The position of each body mattered. A sleeping child near an adult was not only warmer, the child was more visible, easier to reach, easier to calm, and less likely to drift toward the edge of the known space. An injured person or an older person might need to lie where movement was easier, where heat was closer, where others could help without confusion. Those who were more alert, restless, or responsible might stay nearer the outside or nearer the fire, depending on the place and the need. We cannot know the exact arrangements of every ancient group, and it would be wrong to pretend that we can. But the basic problem is clear enough. A small human group in darkness had to protect unequal bodies. Not everyone could run, carry, wake quickly, hear well, or endure cold in the same way. Night made those differences more important. The camp had to hold them together. This is one reason darkness could feel heavier than a predator. A predator threatened life from outside. Night revealed how much life inside the group depended on arrangement. If fuel was too far away, someone had to leave the safer center to get it. If food scraps attracted animals, the group had to manage that risk. If children slept too near the edge, the adults carried a different kind of worry. If people spread too far apart, The warmth and alertness of the group weakened. If everyone slept too deeply, the camp lost part of its listening. These were not dramatic thoughts in the modern sense. They were ordinary pressures of survival. The fear of night was woven into practical decisions. Where should the fire be? Where should the youngest sleep? How close is close enough? Which sounds belong to the land, and which sounds should wake the body? Human origins were shaped by this kind of shared problem-solving. The earliest humans did not survive only because individuals were clever. They survived because intelligence could be distributed across a group. One person remembered a place. Another noticed smoke shifting. Another heard movement. Another kept a child close. Another knew which wood burned longer. Another understood when the cold was becoming dangerous. In the dark, such shared attention became a living shelter. It was not perfect. It could fail. But it made the group larger than any one body. The night pressed against that shelter from every side, and the camp answered with closeness. Fire, bodies, tools, and memory formed a small human system inside a wider non-human space. The center of the camp was not simply brighter, it was more knowable. It was where names, faces, habits, and relationships still held. A person could recognize the breath of someone nearby, the small movement of a child, the shape of a familiar tool, the sound of embers changing. Beyond the edge, the world was not necessarily hostile, but it was less organized around human need. That difference may have been one of the oldest meanings of home, not a building, but a zone where human life could be kept close enough to continue. Ancient humans may have feared the night more than predators because night tested the entire arrangement that made survival possible. It asked whether the group was gathered well enough, whether the vulnerable were protected, whether warmth would last, whether attention could be shared until morning. The camp was a border, but it was also a question the group had to answer every night. Beyond the center of an ancient camp, the world did not suddenly become empty. It remained full of ground, trees, stones, insects, wind, water, sleeping animals, moving animals, and the long shape of the land. But it was no longer organized around human need. That is what made the edge of a camp so important. The edge was not always marked by a wall or a fence. Often it may have been marked only by fading firelight, by the last place where a familiar body could be seen clearly, by the point where tools were no longer within reach, or by the place where a child was told not to wander. Inside that edge, human life had a pattern. Outside it, the same world continued, but the pattern weakened. A person could step beyond the group and still be very close in distance, yet feel much farther away in safety. This is one of the quiet truths of ancient night. Danger did not need to be far away to feel beyond control. It only needed to be outside the range of shared attention. The center of the camp held warmth, memory, and human recognition. Near the fire, faces could return from darkness. Breathing could be heard. A movement could be understood as a companion shifting in sleep. A child's body could be checked by touch. A tool could be found without searching long. The body knew where it was because other bodies helped define the place. But near the edge, the signs became less stable. A shadow might belong to a stone, a bush, an animal, or nothing important at all. A sound might come from the ground, the air, the trees, or the dark beyond the camp. The mind could not easily separate outside space into safe and unsafe zones. The edge became the place where knowledge thinned. This thinning mattered because early human survival depended on staying connected to the group, to fire when it was present, to known ground, to remembered paths, to the people who carried shared knowledge. To be pushed outside that connection, even briefly, could change the body's situation. Someone leaving the center to gather wood, relieve themselves, check a sound, or look for a missing object was not crossing into another world, but the body might feel as if it were crossing into another rule of existence. The group was still behind them. The fire was still burning. The shelter was still close. Yet each step away reduced what could be seen, heard, and confirmed by others. In daylight, separation can be measured. At night, separation becomes more uncertain. A few steps can feel like a distance. A small silence can feel like a gap. A familiar place can feel unfinished, because the group's shared awareness no longer covers it fully. This is why the ancient camp was a fragile border rather than a complete shelter. It worked only while its parts stayed connected. Firelight, bodies, objects, memory, and attention had to overlap. If one part weakened, the border weakened too. If the fire faded, the visible center shrank. If people slept too far apart, warmth and awareness thinned. If tools were misplaced, movement became harder. If a child moved beyond the known circle, the whole camp's attention might have to follow. Night turned space into responsibility. It made the arrangement of the camp feel alive because the camp had to be continually held together by human behavior. A predator might cross into that space, but even without a predator, the edge itself carried pressure. It reminded the body that safety was not a permanent condition. It was something made and remade. Long before houses turned safety into architecture, ancient humans may have known safety as closeness. Closeness to fire, closeness to kin or companions, closeness to tools, closeness to memory, closeness to the place where someone would hear if the body moved suddenly or called softly. The outside of the camp was not simply evil or hostile. It was simply less bound to human order. The night made that difference visible by making almost everything else less visible. In that old darkness, the edge of the camp may have been one of the first lines humans learned to feel without needing to see it clearly. Step inside, and the world had names, warmth, and other breathing bodies. Step outside, and the world still existed, but it no longer answered in the same human way. Sleep is one of the strangest necessities in the history of life. Every animal that sleeps must, for a time, loosen its grip on the world. The eyes close, the muscles soften, the body reacts more slowly. Awareness sinks away from the surface of things. For a human being, this is especially strange, because humans survive by noticing, remembering, planning, and cooperating. The same mind that could read a footprint, recognize a face, shape a stone, carry fire, and remember a path across a changing landscape also had to surrender into sleep. It had to become less watchful in order to remain alive. This quiet contradiction may have made night heavier than any predator. A predator could be faced while awake, but sleep asked the body to become vulnerable at the very hour when the world was hardest to read. In daylight, tiredness can feel simple. The body rests, then rises again. But in the ancient night, rest was never only rest. To lie down was to trust the ground, the group, the fire if it was present, the chosen place, the memory of the day, and the ears of others. The sleeping body could not keep watch over all of these things by itself. It needed a larger body around it, the group. This dependence is very old. Human beings did not begin as sealed individuals sleeping behind locked doors. They began as social animals whose lives were tied to nearness. Nearness meant warmth. It meant being heard. It meant being found quickly if something changed. It meant that a child could be touched, an elder could be helped, a frightened person could borrow calm from others. The night made this nearness more important because sleep reduced the power of each separate body. A strong adult, once asleep, was no longer strong in the same way. A careful tracker, once asleep, could not read signs. A skilled toolmaker, once asleep, could not reach for the tool quickly unless it had been placed nearby. Sleep lowered every person into a shared condition of need. This does not mean ancient people slept in constant fear. That would not be a careful way to imagine the past. People must have known sleep as ordinary, necessary, repeated, and deeply familiar. They would have slept under many skies, in many seasons, beside many fires or shelters, with habits learned across generations. But familiarity does not erase vulnerability. It only teaches people how to live with it. The ancient solution to sleep was not to remove danger completely. It was to arrange life so that danger did not meet a person alone. A group could make sleep possible because not every body had to carry the same kind of awareness at the same time. Some people might wake more easily. Some might sleep closer to children. Some might stir when the fire changed. Some might hear movement before others did. Even without imagining a formal system, the basic truth remains. Humans slept more safely together than alone. This is why the fear of night was also a fear of separation. To be alone at night was not only to face possible animals, it was to lose the human field that made sleep possible. No nearby breath, no familiar movement, no shared warmth, no other ear catching what one ear missed, no hand close enough to touch a child or wake a companion. In the deep beginning of human life, survival was often a shared condition, and night revealed that more clearly than day. During daylight, an individual could walk, gather, watch, carry, and choose. At night, the same individual became smaller, especially when sleep approached. The body needed others not as an idea, but as protection against its own necessary helplessness. This gives the ancient night a different kind of weight. It was not only darkness outside the camp, it was the moment when every person had to trust that the group would hold together while consciousness loosened. The fire could weaken, the wind could shift, sounds could arrive without shape, a child could move, someone could dream, wake, listen, and sleep again. The world continued while human attention rose and fell like breathing. In that rhythm, the group became the bridge between vulnerability and mourning. Perhaps this is why even now, sleep feels easier when the space around us feels held. The modern room is not an ancient camp, but the body still seems to understand that sleep is never just the absence of waking. It is an act of trust. For ancient humans, that trust had to be placed not in walls, but in other living bodies nearby. To sleep safely in the ancient night, a human being needed more than tiredness. The body needed conditions around it. It needed warmth, some protection from weather, a place where the ground could be trusted, and other people close enough that one person's weakness did not become complete exposure. Sleep was never only a private act. It was a shared problem placed gently on the ground. A person could not close the eyes and continue to know what was happening beyond the body. Someone sleeping deeply could not read the movement of shadows, notice the fading of embers, judge a sound beyond the shelter, or watch whether a child had shifted too far from warmth. For this reason, the night may have made human beings depend on one another in a way daylight did not. During the day, a person could sometimes act alone for a while. They could gather, carry, walk, watch, search, or work with tools while still using their own senses to guide them. But at night, especially near sleep, each individual became less complete. The group had to become the larger organism that held awareness while single bodies lost it. This does not mean every ancient camp had a formal guard system in the way a later village or army might. That would be too exact for what we can safely claim. But it is reasonable to understand that shared sleeping, uneven waking, light sleep, fire tending, infant care, and ordinary night sounds would have created a pattern of partial awareness among people resting together. Not everyone had to be fully awake for the group to have more awareness than one sleeping person alone. One person might stir when the fire cracked differently. Another might wake because a child moved. Another might hear a sound at the edge of the camp. Another might sleep lightly after a difficult day or during cold weather. Human sleep itself is not a simple shut door. It has depth, shifting stages, brief awakenings, and sensitivity to important signals. In a group, these small awakenings could overlap. The night could be watched not only by open eyes, but by bodies that were never all equally absent from the world at once. This shared vulnerability reaches back toward the beginning of human life. Human beings were not shaped as solitary sleepers hidden in sealed dens. They became intensely social creatures, dependent on long childhood, learned skills, shared food, remembered places, and communication across generations. A child could not protect itself in the night. An injured adult could not move easily. An older person might carry knowledge but still need warmth and help. A tired hunter or gatherer could not remain alert forever. The group solved what the individual body could not solve alone. It made sleep possible by distributing risk. Nearness allowed warmth to pass between bodies. Familiar sounds made the camp more knowable. A small movement could be recognized as belonging to someone trusted. A sudden change could ripple through the group faster than it could reach an isolated sleeper. The fear of night, then, was also the fear of losing this shared field. A person separated from others after dark did not merely lose company. They lost layers of protection that were built into human life. Another ear, another memory, another hand, another source of heat, another mind comparing present sounds with past experience. Fire, when present, helped. But fire also needed people. It needed someone to notice when it fell too low, someone to gather fuel before darkness made movement harder, someone to understand how smoke, wind, and damp wood changed the camp. Sleeping near fire was not just resting near a tool, it was resting near a responsibility held by the group. The same was true for children. A sleeping child was not safe because the night was gentle. A child was safer because adults arranged the space around that small body, kept it close, warmed it, heard it, and brought it back into the human center when it moved or cried. In this way, the ancient night tied sleep to care. The darkness pressed against the edges of the camp, but care pulled bodies inward. Predators may have been one danger outside the group, but sleep revealed a deeper dependency inside the group. It showed that no human body, however strong in daylight, remained fully self-sufficient after dark. The person who sleeps must trust someone or something beyond the self. In the oldest human nights, that trust was not placed in locks or walls or electric light. It was placed in closeness, habit, fire, memory, and the quiet fact that other breathing bodies were near. The deepest vulnerability of sleep is not only that the body becomes still, it is that the body must trust the world while the mind is partly absent from it. This is a strange requirement for any living creature, but for humans it carried a special weight. Human beings survived by noticing small signs, remembering places, comparing sounds, and reading the behavior of others. Yet every night, the same creature had to release much of that attention. The eyes closed, the hand loosened, the face turned toward darkness. The muscles gave up their readiness. Breath slowed. The body entered a state that was necessary for life, while the world around it did not stop being uncertain. This is one of the quiet reasons the night could feel larger than predators. A predator was a danger the waking body might try to understand. Sleep was the moment when the body could no longer understand enough by itself. For ancient humans, this did not make sleep impossible. It made sleep social. To rest safely, the individual body had to become part of a larger circle of bodies, habits, warmth, and shared attention. The fear of night may have grown from the knowledge, learned over countless generations, that being left alone in darkness was not only lonely, it was biologically smaller. A person alone had one pair of ears, one memory, one tired body, one limited reach. A person near others belonged to a wider field. Someone else might wake first. Someone else might hear what one sleeper missed. Someone else might remember that a certain sound often came from wind in dry branches, or that another sound was not familiar. Someone else might pull a child closer, add fuel, shift position, or simply become alert enough for the whole group to change. In this way, sleep made humans depend on one another more deeply than daylight did. Daylight allowed more independence. A person could walk a short distance, gather material, search for food, carry water, or study tracks with their own senses. But at night, especially when sleep approached, the individual lost some of that independence. The group became the place where the individual weakness of sleep could be held. This may be one of the oldest meanings of safety, not the absence of danger, but the presence of others close enough to share vulnerability. The beginning of human life was shaped by long childhood, learned skill, and social memory. No human infant could survive by strength alone. No young child could understand the night by itself. Even adults depended on knowledge passed from others. Which places had been safe before, which ground stayed dry, how wind moved through a shelter, when to keep fire low or strong, which noises mattered, which animals used the same paths. Night gathered all of these dependencies together. It made the group more than a collection of individuals. It made the group a living shelter. The bodies near the center held warmth. The more experienced held memory. The restless or lightly sleeping held pieces of awareness. The sleeping held trust. The young held the future. The old, when present, may have held knowledge that strength alone could not replace. In such a world, to fear night was also to fear the weakening of these bonds. If someone drifted too far from the center, the body became harder to hear, harder to touch, harder to protect. If the fire faded, the shared space shrank. If people scattered, the night entered between them. This fear was not dramatic. It was practical, slow, and deeply human. It lived in the instinct to stay near, to listen for another breath, to place a child close to warmth, to avoid unnecessary movement beyond the edge of the known space. Sleep required trust, and trust required nearness. Predators could threaten from the outside, but the night threatened by testing the inside of the group, its closeness, its memory, its care, its ability to remain one circle until morning. Perhaps this is why a human being can still feel uneasy in darkness, even without any visible danger. The body remembers, in a quiet way, that sleep is not only rest, it is surrender. And for most of human history, surrender was safest when it was shared. Night did not fall on every human body in the same way. A strong adult could listen, stand, carry, choose, and move with some control, but a group was never made only of strong adults. There were children who could not understand distance or danger as adults did. There were infants who needed warmth without knowing why. There were older people whose knowledge might be deep, but whose bodies could be slower, colder, or less able to move quickly. There were injured people, pregnant women, tired hunters, sick companions, and those whose strength had been spent by the day. When darkness came, it did not only ask whether the strongest person could survive, it asked whether the whole group could hold together around its most vulnerable bodies. This made the night heavier. A predator might threaten one person in one moment, but night widened the problem to everyone who needed protection, warmth, and nearness until morning. For ancient humans, the vulnerable were not separate from survival. They were part of the reason survival mattered at all. A child was not only a small body in need of care. A child was the future of the group, the continuation of memory, language, skill, and belonging. An elder, when present, was not only a weaker body. An elder could carry knowledge of places, seasons, foods, dangers, births, deaths, and earlier nights. A person recovering from injury might later return to strength. A pregnant woman carried a life not yet visible to the group's full attention. The night pressed on all of these conditions. It made cold more dangerous. It made movement harder. It made separation harder to notice quickly. It made a small cry, a restless shift, or a quiet absence more meaningful. The fear of night was therefore not only fear for the self, it could also be fear for those who could not protect themselves. This is a deeply human kind of fear. It grows from care. In daylight, a child can be watched across a small distance. The eyes can follow movement, see where a hand reaches, notice when little feet approach water, fire, a slope, or brush. In darkness, the same child becomes harder to track. The body may still be close, but closeness has to be maintained more deliberately. An infant may need to be held against warmth. A young child may need to sleep between adults or near a protected center. Someone weak from illness or age may need the easier place, the warmer place, the place where another person can notice changes in breathing or movement. These details sound quiet, but they are the real structure of survival. Human beings did not continue through deep time only by facing enemies. They continued by keeping dependent bodies alive through ordinary nights. The beginning of human life was shaped by unusually long childhood compared with many other animals. A human child needs care for many years, learning slowly how to walk well, use tools, understand social life, read danger, speak, remember, and belong. That long dependence made human groups powerful because knowledge could be taught and carried across generations, but it also made them vulnerable because the future arrived in small, fragile bodies. Night exposed that truth. A group could not treat darkness as only an individual challenge. The darkness asked whether care could remain organized when vision weakened and sleep approached. It asked whether warmth could be shared, whether children could be kept near, whether the weak could rest without being abandoned to the edge. This gives the fear of night a different emotional weight from fear of predators. The fear was not always sharp. It might have been slow, watchful, and practical. It could live in the decision to pull a child closer, to keep embers alive a little longer, to place someone frail nearer the warmth, to avoid moving the group after dark unless necessary. It could live in the awareness that one careless step, one unnoticed wandering, one long cold hour, or one delayed response might matter more for the vulnerable than for the strong. Ancient humans feared the night not because they lacked courage, but because they understood dependency. They knew, through repeated experience, that survival was not measured only by the strongest body standing until morning. It was measured by whether the smallest, weakest, slowest, and most tired bodies could also reach the next day. In that sense, night did not merely darken the world. It revealed the moral shape of the group. It showed that humans were never just survivors alone in the dark. They were protectors of one another, gathered around fragile lives that made the darkness feel deeper. A young child does not experience night as an adult does. An adult can understand that darkness changes what can be seen. An adult can remember the shape of the camp, the place of the fire, the direction of water, the edge of shelter, the position of other bodies. A child has less of that inner map. The world is still being learned. Distance is not yet fully understood. Danger is not yet separated clearly from curiosity. A small opening between bodies, a sound beyond the light, a moving shadow, or the wish to follow an adult may be enough to pull a child toward the edge of safety. In daylight, this can be corrected quickly. A glance, a call, a hand reaching out, a body moving across visible ground. At night, the same small movement carries more weight because the child may disappear into uncertainty before the adult fully understands what has changed. This is one reason ancient night could feel heavier for the whole group. It did not only shrink the world for adults, it made the future of the group harder to hold. Human children are born dependent, and they remain dependent for a long time. This long dependence is one of the great features of human life. It allows learning, language, memory, skill, and social knowledge to grow slowly inside the young. But it also means that human survival has always required patient care. A child must be warmed, fed, carried, watched, taught, calmed, and protected long before that child can fully protect itself. In daylight, care can spread across space. A child may sit near a working adult, follow a path, watch hands shaping tools, learn the names of things, imitate movement, or play near others while still remaining visible. At night, care must draw inward. The child has to be close enough to be touched, heard, and warmed. The adult body becomes part of the child's shelter. The group becomes part of the child's boundary. The fire, when present, does not only light the camp, it helps adults keep the small body inside the known world. Cold made this care even more important. A small body can lose heat more easily than a larger one, and an infant or young child cannot simply decide to endure the night with adult discipline. The child's need is physical, immediate, and honest. Warmth must come from other bodies, coverings when available, protected ground, shelter from wind, and sometimes the controlled heat of fire. The night therefore became a test of closeness. It asked whether adults could keep the vulnerable body near enough to warmth without placing it too near. Smoke, sparks, hard ground, dampness, or the restless movements of others. These are quiet details, but they belong to the real history of human survival. Before the long line of houses, beds, blankets, and sealed rooms, protection often meant arrangement. A child placed nearer the center, an adult lying close enough to feel movement, a group choosing a place where wind was reduced, fuel gathered before dark, the edge of camp treated as something a child should not cross. In this way, fear of night was tied not only to danger from outside, but to the difficulty of maintaining care when the senses weakened. A child might cry and reveal need. A child might wake and disturb rest. A child might become cold, frightened, or restless. None of these things are dramatic by themselves, but in an ancient landscape, each one required response. The group could not simply ignore the small body, because the small body carried the group's tomorrow. The deep beginning of human life was therefore built around more than toughness. It was built around tenderness under pressure. The ability to keep children alive through dark, cold, uncertain hours may have been as important as the ability to face danger directly. This changes the meaning of the night. It was not only a time when predators might move, or when adults could not see well, it was also a time when care had to become more concentrated. The group had to reduce space, share warmth, listen more carefully, and keep the weakest close to the center of human attention. Ancient humans may have feared the night because it threatened not just the body that feared, but the bodies that depended on that body. In the darkness, survival was not only the question of who could stand against danger, it was the quieter question of who could be kept warm, close, and known until morning. To fear for a child in the night is to feel time differently. The danger is not only what might happen now, it is what might be lost later. A child carries days that have not arrived yet. Future memory, future skill, future language, future hands that may one day gather food, make tools, care for others, and remember the group's stories. In ancient human life, this mattered deeply because each generation depended on the survival of the next, and the next generation began as small bodies unable to protect themselves. The night made that truth impossible to ignore. When darkness covered the land, adults were not only protecting themselves from cold, uncertainty, animals, or injury, they were protecting continuity. They were keeping tomorrow inside the circle of today. This may be one reason night could feel heavier than predators. A predator was a threat to life, but night placed pressure on the whole chain of life. It touched infants, children, the sick, the injured, the old, and everyone responsible for keeping them close. The group's future did not survive through strength alone. It survived through care repeated many times, in ordinary hours, often when no one would later remember the exact act, pulling a child nearer, adding fuel, listening to a small cry, moving a sleeping body away from damp ground, sharing warmth when the air grew colder, choosing not to travel after dark. These quiet acts do not look heroic from far away, but they are part of how human beings continued. The origin of humanity was not only in stone tools, hunting, fire, or walking upright. It was also in the long work of keeping dependent lives alive long enough to learn. A human child had to learn landscapes, foods, faces, gestures, dangers, seasons, tools, and rules of closeness. That learning required years, and because it required years, every night became one small bridge across vulnerability. If the bridge failed too often, knowledge could not pass forward. The fear of night, then, may have contained a fear older and deeper than self-preservation. It may have contained the fear of interruption. A group could lose not only a body but a future adult, a future parent, a future holder of memory. This does not mean ancient people thought in the same abstract words we use now. They may not have framed the night as a problem of generations, but the body can understand continuity without naming it. An adult who holds a cold child closer does not need a theory of human history. The act itself carries the knowledge. Small bodies must be kept warm. Wandering must be prevented. Fear must be calmed. Sleep must be made possible. Morning must be reached. In this way, the night shaped human care through practical repetition. It taught the group that survival was not one event, but a chain of small protections. It also made the presence of elders and experienced adults important in a different way. Older people, when they survived long enough, could carry knowledge that helped protect the young, where the safer resting places were, which winds turned coldest, which sounds were familiar, which animals moved near water, which paths became dangerous in darkness, which plants or materials could help with warmth. We should be careful not to invent details beyond evidence, but the general pattern is clear. Human life depends on learned knowledge, and learned knowledge depends on people living long enough to pass it on. Night pressed on both ends of that chain, the young who needed protection and the older or experienced who helped guide protection. This makes the fear of night more than a private emotion. It becomes a social pressure around time itself. The darkness asked the group whether it could keep its fragile members inside the human circle until the light returned. It asked whether care could remain steady when everyone was tired. It asked whether warmth, attention, and memory could hold against cold, sleep, and uncertainty. Predators may have stood outside the group as visible dangers when they appeared, but night surrounded the group with a slower question. Can what is vulnerable be carried through the hours when the world is hardest to read? In that question, we can hear something central about being human. Ancient humans did not survive by becoming fearless. They survived by letting fear guide attention toward what mattered most. And often, what mattered most was not the strongest body, but the smallest one breathing quietly near the center of the dark. To be chased is frightening because the danger has direction. Something is behind, beside, or ahead. The body knows that movement matters. It may run, turn, climb, call out, Reach for others or look for fire, stones, trees, water, or open ground. Even if the danger is terrible, the mind has a shape to work with, but to be lost in the dark is different. There may be no single enemy. There may be no sound of pursuit, no visible animal, no clear moment when the danger begins. The fear grows from the realization that the body no longer knows how to return. A person can stand still, breathe quietly, and still be in trouble. The group may be near, but not near enough to hear. The camp may be behind, but the direction has slipped. The path may exist, but the eyes cannot hold it. This kind of fear is slow. It does not always strike like an attack. It spreads through the body as the familiar world fails to answer. In daylight, human beings are powerful readers of place. A ridge, a tree line, a bend in a stream, a patch of exposed stone, a slope of ground, a certain pattern of plants, all can help the mind keep its position. The sun itself gives direction. Shadows give time. The land can be compared with memory. A person can say, even without words, I came from there, water lies there, the shelter is beyond that rise, the others are back toward the smoke. Ancient humans depended on this kind of practical geography. Long before written maps, the map lived in the body, in repeated walking, in remembered landmarks, in the feel of certain ground underfoot, in the relationship between water, shelter, food, wind, and animal movement. During the day, such a map could be corrected by sight. At night, the map became less stable. A familiar tree might become one dark trunk among many. A path might disappear into grass. A rock that marked the turn might be missed. A stream might be heard but not placed. The body could know the place and still lose its certainty inside the place. This matters because getting lost was not only a problem of fear. It could become a problem of cold, injury, exhaustion, thirst, separation, and silence. A predator might pass and be gone, but a lost person remained inside uncertainty. The body still needed warmth. It still needed water. It still needed the group. It still needed a place to rest without becoming more exposed. A person moving in the wrong direction could widen the distance from safety. With every careful step, a person staying still might conserve energy, but might also remain beyond hearing. Calling out could help, or it could reveal position to something else. Moving toward a sound could lead back, or lead farther away. Darkness made every choice heavier because the evidence behind each choice was thin. The ancient beginning of human life was built around connection to place and people. To be separated from either was to become smaller. Alone in the night, a person lost not only company, but the shared intelligence of the group. No one else could compare memories of the path. No one else could say that the stream bends this way, or that the ground rises before camp, or that the wind had shifted since sunset. No one else could share warmth or divide attention. The lost body had to carry too much by itself. This is why being lost in darkness could be more frightening than being chased. A chase is urgent, but it may end quickly. Being lost can continue. It can stretch through cold hours, through listening, through hesitation, through the repeated hope that the next shape will become familiar. The fear does not need teeth. It needs distance without measure. It needs a familiar land turned slightly strange. It needs the body to understand that every direction now carries a question. For ancient humans, night did not only hide the path. It weakened the relationship between memory and return, and when return became uncertain, the darkness itself could feel like the thing holding the body away from life. During the day, a landscape teaches the body how to return. The lesson is not written like a map. It is learned through walking, turning, seeing, smelling, and remembering. A person follows the bend of a stream, notices the dark side of a ridge, remembers where a certain tree leans, where stones become larger, where the grass grows thinner, where smoke once rose from the camp. Direction is not only north or south. For most of human history, direction was relationship. Water lay below the slope, shelter stood beyond the open ground. The group rested near the rocks. The path curved before the trees thickened. These connections allowed people to move through wide places without carrying drawn maps. The world itself held the map, and the body learned to read it. but darkness weakened that reading. It did not remove the land. It removed many of the marks that made the land speak clearly. A tree that guided the way in daylight became only a darker shape among other dark shapes. A path that was obvious under the sun became a soft uncertainty under the feet. A dry stream bed, a patch of stone, a hollow in the ground, a break in the shrubs, all could lose their place in the mind. The ancient human body could still remember, but memory needed visible anchors. Without enough anchors, return became a question. This is why night could make even familiar territory feel widened and unstable. In daylight, a person might walk away from camp with confidence because the route remains connected behind them. Each step has a relation to the last one. The eyes check the land, the feet feel the slope, the mind updates the path. But in darkness, the chain can break. One missed turn may not seem important at first. One mistaken tree, one wrong gap between stones, one sound followed in the wrong direction, one attempt to avoid uneven ground, and the body begins to lose the line back. The danger is quiet because it may not announce itself immediately. A person does not always know the exact moment they have become lost. At first, they may only feel that the ground is not answering as expected. The path should be here, but it is not. The stream should sound nearer, but it sounds farther away. The shelter should appear after this rise, but the rise is not the one remembered. This slow confusion can be more frightening than a sudden threat, because it makes the mind distrust its own map. For ancient humans, that inner map was a survival tool. It helped people find water, return to shelter, avoid dangerous places, follow seasonal routes, and remain connected to the group. The beginning of human life was built on repeated movement through remembered environments. Our ancestors did not live only in one blank wilderness. They learned places deeply. They returned to useful areas, recognized patterns, and carried knowledge from one day into the next. Yet night could thin that knowledge. It could make the known place feel partly unknown. The body might turn left because memory says left, then hesitate because the dark shape ahead does not match. It might follow the sound of water, but sound travels strangely through rock, trees, wind, and open ground. It might move toward what seems like firelight, only to find moonlight on pale stone or a gap in cloud. Darkness does not need to deceive the mind completely. It only needs to make small errors easier. Each small error can place the body farther from the group. This is why getting lost was not only about geography, it was about losing the human center. The camp was not just a location. It was warmth, fire, companions, tools, protection, shared memory, and the possibility of sleep. To lose the way back was to lose access to all of those things at once. A person alone in the dark still had a body, memory, and intelligence, but the body had become separated from the larger system that made night survivable. No one else could correct the route. No one else could hear the same sound and compare it with experience. No one else could share heat or help if the ground turned bad. The night made distance emotional because distance from the group meant distance from safety. In daylight, a far place can still feel reachable if the path is visible. At night, even a near place can feel unreachable if the path cannot be trusted. This may be why ancient humans could fear the night more than predators. A predator threatens from one direction, but getting lost dissolves direction itself. The body is still standing on Earth, yet the Earth no longer points clearly home. And when home becomes uncertain, darkness is no longer just around the person. It is between the person and return. Being chased makes fear move quickly through the body. The heart rises, the legs prepare, the eyes look for escape, and the mind becomes narrow. There is danger, and the danger seems to have a direction, but being lost in the dark is slower. It does not always give the body one clear thing to do. A lost person may stand still and listen, then take a few steps, then stop again. The fear comes not from speed, but from duration. It stretches. It keeps asking the same quiet question, where is the way back? For ancient humans, that question could be more frightening than the sound of pursuit, because it could last through cold hours, through fading strength, through uncertainty that did not resolve. A chase might end in escape, injury, or death. Getting lost could become a long separation from everything that made survival possible. The group might still exist only a short distance away, but distance in darkness is not measured only by steps. It is measured by whether the body can return. In daylight, a person who becomes uncertain can often climb a rise, look across the land, find smoke, recognize a stream, see the slope of a hill, or turn toward the sun. The world gives back enough information for the mind to correct itself. In darkness, correction becomes harder. The person may not know whether walking will help or make things worse. Moving may bring them closer to camp or farther away. Staying still may protect them from injury or leave them in cold silence beyond the reach of other voices. Calling out may guide the group, or may go unheard, or may feel unsafe when the land beyond sight cannot be judged. This is the deep pressure of being lost at night. Every choice has a shadow beside it. Ancient humans lived in a world where the body's connection to the group was not simply emotional, it was practical. The group meant warmth, shared attention, fire when available, help with injury, remembered roots, protection for children, and the ability to sleep with some trust. To lose the way back was to lose access to that wider human body. Alone, a person became smaller. One pair of ears had to listen for everything. One memory had to hold the path. One body had to stay warm. One mind had to decide which sound mattered and which did not. The night made this isolation heavier because the landscape could not be read clearly enough to repair the separation. This connects directly to the beginning of human life. Our ancestors were not built to survive by strength alone. They survived by staying connected to places, to seasonal knowledge, to water, to tools, to fire, to other people, to repeated paths that could be trusted. Getting lost in darkness broke several of those connections at once. The person was still in the same physical world, but no longer inside the same human order. The path back to the group might be near, yet without enough light it became hidden inside many possible paths. The sound of water might guide or confuse. A faint glow might be fire or moonlight on stone. The body might turn toward memory, then stop because the ground felt wrong. Fear grew because return itself had become uncertain. This may be why being lost could be more terrifying than being chased. A predator, once seen, gives the mind a terrible clarity. It shows where danger is. It forces a response. But the darkened landscape gives no single answer. It makes the body live inside delay. The danger may be cold. It may be injury. It may be distance. It may be a predator later. It may be exhaustion before morning. It may be the simple fact that no one knows where the person has gone. In this way, the night turns absence into danger. The absent path, the absent voice, the absent fire, the absent certainty of being known by others. Ancient humans did not need to imagine the night as a monster for it to feel powerful. A person separated from the group could feel the dark as something between the body and all the things that made life continue. The fear was not only that something might find them, it was that they might not find their way back. And in the long human past, losing the way back could mean losing the fragile circle where warmth, memory, sleep and belonging waited until morning. Daytime gives the mind work to do. It gives the hands tasks, the feet direction, the eyes distance, and the body a rhythm that can be followed without thinking too deeply about it. A person can walk toward water, gather wood, search for food, shape a tool, carry a child, look for signs of animals, watch the weather, or follow others across a familiar place. The day is full of small purposes. Each purpose gives time a shape. Morning moves into movement. Movement moves into fatigue. Fatigue moves toward rest. Even before clocks, the body could feel time through action, heat, hunger, shadow, and distance travelled. But night changed this. When darkness came, many actions narrowed. The body could no longer move as freely. The eyes could not read far. The group had to draw inward. The camp became more important than the path. The next step became more serious than the next journey. Time no longer felt like a road across the land. It felt more like waiting inside a circle. This change in time may be one of the quiet reasons ancient humans feared the night more deeply than predators. A predator can make time fast. Night can make time long. A visible threat may tighten the body into a few urgent moments, but darkness can stretch uncertainty across hours. Nothing has to happen for the body to remain alert. A sound may come, then silence. The fire may burn, then sink lower. The wind may shift, then settle. A child may stir, then sleep again. The group may rest, but not completely disappear into rest. The mind lives between sleep and attention, between the known center and the unreadable world beyond it. In such a state, time becomes filled with possibility. Every small change seems to arrive more slowly because the body has fewer distractions and fewer ways to act. The day lets fear move into movement. The night often traps fear inside listening. For ancient humans, this long listening was not an empty experience. It was tied to survival. The beginning of human life took place in environments where action and attention had to follow natural cycles. Light shaped what could be done. Heat shaped how far one could move. Cold shaped how close bodies needed to be. Hunger shaped memory of food and place. Darkness shaped waiting. The group could not simply continue the day's activities at full strength after sunset. Some work could happen near fire or under moonlight, but the wider landscape became less available. This meant the mind had to remain with what could not yet be resolved. Is the fire strong enough? Is the child warm enough? Was that sound only wind? Are the others close? Will the cold deepen? Will morning come before the body becomes too tired? These questions did not need to be spoken. They could exist as bodily awareness, a slow pressure around the edges of rest. A predator is frightening because it may enter the circle of life. Night is frightening because it delays the answer to what might enter. The hours can pass without proof. This delay changes the inner world. A person waiting in darkness may begin to notice the body more sharply, the sound of breathing, the ache of the ground, the cold at the back, the fading warmth of embers, the small movements of other people. The outside world becomes less visible, and the inside world grows louder. Thoughts can become slower but heavier. Memory can return. A place where danger once happened may come back to mind. A lost path, an injured companion, a night when rain ruined warmth, a time when animals moved too close, all of these could return more strongly when the body has fewer tasks to occupy it. We should be careful not to claim exactly what ancient people thought in those hours. But we can understand the conditions. When action decreases and uncertainty remains, the mind has room to hold fear for longer. This is not weakness. It is the natural result of a body built to prepare before certainty arrives. Daylight allowed ancient humans to solve many problems by doing something. Walk, gather, look, repair, follow, avoid, return. Night often required them to solve problems by not doing too much. Stay close, listen, conserve warmth, wait for light. Let sleep come, but not so deeply that the group loses its living edge. This kind of time is different from daytime time. It is slower, more circular, and more dependent on patience. The fear inside it is not a sudden flame. It is a low ember that remains because the dark has not yet given back the world. Ancient humans may have feared the night not only because of what could happen in it, but because night made them live for many hours with what had not happened yet. At night, the world often becomes quieter, but the mind does not always become calmer. Silence can make small things larger. A faint movement in grass, the soft settling of ash, the distant call of an animal, the breath of someone sleeping nearby, the shift of wind against stone or leaves, all can become more noticeable when the day's labour has stopped. During daylight, the mind is carried outward by tasks. It follows the hands, the path, the weather, the search for food, the care of children, the need to move before heat, cold, or distance changes the day. But after dark, when movement becomes limited, the mind has fewer places to go. It begins to stay with what is close. It listens to the fire. It listens to bodies. It listens to the spaces where the eyes cannot reach. This kind of listening can make time feel longer, because each sound arrives into a wide field of waiting. A single crack of wood can fill a moment. A silence after the crack can feel even longer. For ancient humans, this was not merely mood. It was a condition created by the environment itself. When the sun was gone, the useful world contracted. The places that could be crossed, searched, gathered from, or explored became fewer. The body could still act, but action had to be measured. The night asked for restraint. It asked people to remain closer to the camp, closer to fire when present, closer to one another, and closer to memory. In that narrowed space, sound and thought gained strength. The mind could begin to revisit what the day had left behind. A difficult path, a sign of animals near water, a child's stumble, a place where food was scarce, a cold wind that might deepen before morning, a person missing from the usual place near the fire. These things could return at night because the body had stopped moving. Daylight gave humans a chance to gather evidence directly. Darkness forced them to live with evidence already gathered, and with all the gaps that remained. This is why the night could feel mentally heavy. It did not only hide the land, it gave the mind more time to imagine what the hidden land might contain. The imagination here was not separate from survival. It was part of how the brain prepared the body. If a group had seen tracks near water earlier, the memory of those tracks might matter more after dark. If a storm seemed possible, the sound of wind might be listened to more closely. If food had been difficult to find, hunger might make the night feel longer. If someone had been injured, every movement in sleep might carry concern. The mind used memory to stretch beyond the small circle of present sight. But memory can also lengthen fear. A danger that was not present could still shape attention because it had been possible earlier, or because something similar had happened before. In daylight, action can interrupt fear. A person can check the ground, follow the track, gather more wood, move to another place, speak with others, search, repair, carry, or decide. At night, many of those answers become harder. The mind may continue working after the body has fewer ways to test its thoughts. This creates a special kind of time filled with preparation that cannot yet become action. The body waits for morning not only because light is pleasant, but because light restores the power to verify. Morning gives back distance, color, direction, and the ability to compare memory with the world. Until then, the night can make the mind live among possibilities. This may help explain why ancient humans could fear the night more than predators. A predator, if seen, gives the mind something specific to answer. The long night gives the mind many unfinished questions at once. What was that sound? Is the fire enough? Is the child warm? Will the weather hold? Did something move beyond the edge? Is the group still gathered well? The questions may remain quiet, but they keep attention alive. Even sleep may not fully end them, because sleeping bodies can stir, wake briefly, listen, and return to rest. The night stretches time by making certainty wait. It teaches the body patience, but not complete peace. In that waiting, ancient humans met a form of fear that was slow, repeated, and deeply tied to being human. The fear of having to listen before the world is ready to answer. When the body cannot act, the mind often continues moving. This may be one of the oldest tensions inside the human night. A person lies near others or sits close to fading heat or listens from a sheltered place while the outside world remains beyond full reach. The hands are still. The feet are not travelling. The eyes cannot carry the mind far across the land. Yet thought does not sleep immediately. It circles. It remembers what was seen before sunset. It returns to a strange track near water, a sudden silence among birds, a cold wind from the open ground, a child who stumbled earlier in the day, a companion who seemed tired, a place where food was harder to find. These memories are not random. They are the mind trying to prepare. But preparation becomes difficult when the body cannot easily test what the mind is holding. In daylight, a worry can be answered by movement. A person can go and look. They can follow a mark, gather more fuel, repair a tool, speak with others, change direction, leave a place, or choose a better one. In darkness, many of those answers are delayed. The mind keeps asking, but the world does not give enough back. This delay can make night feel longer than its hours. It turns time into a space filled with unfinished meaning. A sound is heard, and then nothing follows. A child settles, then stirs again. Wind rises, then falls. Fire brightens, then sinks. Each change asks for interpretation, but not every change allows a clear response. This is not panic. It is the slower labour of attention. Ancient humans may have spent many nights inside this labour, not because they were weaker than modern people, but because their lives were more directly tied to natural cycles. Day gave them a world that could be entered. Night gave them a world that often had to be endured. The origin of human life was shaped by both conditions, the active intelligence of daylight and the waiting intelligence of darkness. One intelligence moved across land, the other held still and listened. Both mattered. A group that reacted to every sound would lose rest. A group that reacted to nothing could miss a real change. The night stretched time because it forced the mind to remain between these two eras. Too much fear wastes strength. Too little fear may ignore warning. Between them lies the old human practice of cautious waiting. This waiting could make the night feel more powerful than a predator. A predator gives the mind a clearer object, even if the object is frightening. It can be watched, avoided, or remembered. But a long night can hold many possible dangers without revealing any one of them. Cold may become worse. The fire may fade. A distant sound may return. Someone may need care. The group may sleep too deeply. The weather may change before morning. These possibilities do not attack all at once. They remain suspended. The body must rest while also being ready to wake. The mind must let go while also staying close enough to return. Sleep itself becomes uneven, crossed by brief moments of listening. A person may wake without knowing why, hear the same darkness around them, and slowly settle again. In such moments, time does not feel like a line. It feels like a circle. Wake, listen, wait, sleep, wake again. Modern people still know a faint version of this when the house is dark and a small sound seems to hold more importance than it would in daylight. But for ancient humans, the surrounding world was not sealed away. The dark was not on the other side of glass. It was beside the skin, beyond the fire, under the same sky, moving through the same air. This made the waiting more real. Still, the night was not only a burden. It may also have trained a kind of patience that daylight did not require. It taught bodies to conserve movement, to listen before acting, to gather close, to respect uncertainty, and to wait for the return of conditions that made the world readable again. Morning was not simply brighter. It was the restoration of verification. It let memory meet the land again. It let the eyes check what the ears had wondered about. It turned possible dangers back into tracks, branches, wind, stones, animals, or nothing at all. Until that return, ancient humans lived inside a long interval where the mind had to carry what the body could not yet resolve. Perhaps this is why night could feel so deep. It did not always bring danger. Sometimes it only held the human mind beside unanswered possibilities until light came back. Archaeology is powerful, but it is also quiet about certain things. It can show where people lived, where fires burned, where bones were broken, where stone tools were shaped, where shelters were used again, where pigments were placed, where food was processed, and where human hands changed the ground. But it cannot dig up fear itself. No one can lift an ancient night from the soil and hear exactly what a person felt when the fire sank low or when a sound moved beyond the edge of a camp. This limit matters. And quote, "If we want to speak honestly about why ancient humans may have feared the night more than predators, we must not pretend to know their inner lives with certainty. We can only move carefully from material traces, human biology, environmental conditions and patterns seen across human life. The past does not give us a diary of darkness. It gives us ashes, stones, bones, shelters, hearths, footprints, cut marks, charred wood, and places where people returned. From these traces, we can ask what kind of world required such organization. A hearth, for example, is not just evidence that fire once burned. It suggests a center of activity. Around it, people may have cooked, warmed themselves, worked, gathered, rested, or made the space more livable. A repeated hearth in a shelter tells us that the place was not meaningless ground. It had been chosen, used, and made part of human life. Stone tools found near such spaces suggest work, planning, and the need to keep useful objects close. Animal bones can suggest food, processing, and the presence of other lives brought into the human center. None of this proves a specific fear in a specific person, but it does show something important. Humans were constantly turning uncertain environments into organized spaces. They did not merely pass through the world. They selected places, changed them, returned to them, and left behind signs of repeated attention. Night fits into this picture, because night would have increased the need for such organization. When vision weakened, arrangement mattered more. Where the fire was, where tools were kept, where bodies rested, where food remains were placed, where shelter reduced wind or rain, these things could change the quality of the dark hours. Archaeology can sometimes reveal the physical side of these decisions, even if it cannot reveal the feelings directly. A cluster of tools near a hearth, a protected shelter with repeated occupation, a pattern of burned material, or a living floor shaped by use may not say, they were afraid of the night. But it can say, they made places where life could be held more securely. The beginning of human life was never just a story of wandering across empty land. It was also a story of making temporary order, selecting, arranging, remembering, and returning. These are deeply human acts. They belong to creatures who survive not only by strength, but by making the world more readable. This is why the limits of archaeology are not a weakness. They help keep the story honest. We should not claim that every fire was lit because people feared darkness. Fire had many uses: warmth, cooking, light, social gathering, protection in some contexts, tool work, and possibly many meanings we cannot fully reconstruct. We should not claim that every shelter was chosen because of predators, or that every camp was arranged for one single purpose. Ancient life was complex, and the evidence rarely allows one simple answer. But the broad pattern remains meaningful. Humans repeatedly created centers of control inside environments that were not fully controllable. They gathered around heat and light. They used shelter when available. They placed tools and food within human spaces. They returned to places that worked. These patterns show the practical side of living with uncertainty. Predators were part of that uncertainty, but not the whole of it. Weather, cold, darkness, distance, injury, hunger, children, memory, and the limits of the senses all shaped where and how people rested. The night, in particular, would have made the edges of human control more visible. Archaeology lets us see those edges indirectly. It shows the small islands humans made in the wider world. It shows where fire touched the ground, where stone met hand, where animals became food, where shelters held repeated presence. It cannot tell us exactly what a person whispered, feared, remembered, or dreamed, but it can show that human beings were already answering the night with structure, and perhaps that is enough to begin carefully. The fear of night was not something floating in imagination alone. It belonged to real places, real fires, real bodies, and real efforts to make darkness survivable. A hearth is one of the most human marks that can remain in the ground. Long after voices have vanished, long after bodies have moved on, a patch of burned earth can still say that people once gathered there and changed the night in a practical way. It does not tell us the full story. It does not tell us whether someone was afraid, calm, hungry, tired, grieving, or watchful, but it does show that fire was held in place, and that holding fire in place is not a small act. A flame needs fuel, position, care, and purpose. It creates a center around which other things can happen. Tools may be made or repaired nearby. Food may be cooked or shared. Bodies may rest close enough to warmth. Children may be kept within reach. Conversation, teaching, memory, and silence may all gather around the same glow. When archaeologists find traces of hearths, burned bones, stone tools, and repeated use of shelters, they are not finding fear directly. They are finding the material shape of human order. This matters because night was a problem of order as much as danger. The dark hours made space harder to read, so people had to make space more arranged. A hearth helped define where the center was. A shelter helped define where one side of the world could be blocked or softened. Tools placed nearby helped extend the hand without requiring long movement into darkness. Food remains, stones, ashes, and worn surfaces all suggest that people did not simply sleep anywhere without thought. They made certain places more usable through repeated acts. The ground became human because it was chosen again, altered again, remembered again. This kind of repetition is one of the quiet foundations of human history. Our ancestors did not only survive by meeting each day as if it were new, they survived by building patterns. A useful place became known. A good shelter could be returned to. A fire could be placed where smoke moved better, where wind was reduced, where bodies could gather without being too exposed. A tool could be kept close because needing it in the dark would be different from needing it in daylight. These small arrangements do not prove a single emotion, but they reveal a deep practical truth. Ancient humans were constantly reducing uncertainty. They could not remove darkness, cold, animals, injury, hunger, or distance, but they could make certain spaces more predictable than others. They could make a place where fire had burned before, where the group knew how to sit, where the ground had already been tested by use, where the surrounding land was part of memory. A predator might leave a track, but a hearth leaves another kind of sign, a sign that humans answered the world by making a center. The archaeological record also reminds us to be careful. A cave was not always a safe bedroom. A rock shelter was not always used the same way. A hearth could serve cooking, heat, light, craft, social gathering, or several purposes at once. Bones may tell us about food, but not always about fear. Tools may tell us about activity, but not always about the hour of that activity. We should not force the evidence into one dramatic story, yet the broad picture is still strong enough to guide us. Human beings created places where life could be concentrated. They brought materials together. They used fire. They left marks of repeated presence. They turned parts of the landscape into temporary human centers. That is exactly the kind of behavior one would expect from a species living with darkness as a recurring limit. The night did not need to be named as an enemy for people to respond to it. The response could be built into ordinary habits. Gather before dark, keep useful things close, return to shelter, place bodies near warmth, reduce wandering, remember where fuel can be found, notice which places hold smoke, wind, water, and sound in better ways. The beginning of human life was made from such habits. Not grand monuments at first, not permanent rooms, not bright streets, but small zones of repeated care. Ash on earth, stone near hand, bone near fire, a sheltered wall behind the body, a circle where people could be seen. These traces show us that ancient humans did not face night as isolated creatures waiting helplessly. They made islands of control. The islands were partial, fragile, and temporary, but they were real. And in their remains, we can see why the night mattered so much. It was not only a time of fear, it was a time that forced human beings to organize space carefully, because organization was one of the ways a vulnerable body reached morning. The material traces of ancient life ask us to be humble. A hearth can show that fire burned, but not exactly what people whispered beside it. A stone tool can show skill, but not the full emotion in the hand that held it. A shelter can show repeated use, but not every reason a group returned there. This humility is important because the night is easy to turn into a story that sounds stronger than the evidence allows. We can imagine fear, but we cannot excavate it directly. We can suggest, compare, and reason from what is known about human bodies, social life, environments, and the archaeological record. But we should not pretend that every ancient fire was a symbol of terror, or that every dark shelter was chosen because of predators. The past is more careful than that. It gives us signs of life, not complete sentences, and yet these signs still speak. They show that human beings repeatedly organized space, gathered around centers, used fire, shaped tools, processed food, returned to useful places, and lived through environments where safety was never guaranteed. This does not prove one simple emotion, but it reveals a real pattern. Ancient humans were always working to make uncertain places more livable. Night belongs naturally inside that pattern. When darkness reduced vision, made movement harder, stretched time, and weakened the reading of distance, organization became more important. The archaeological record cannot say, "Here is the moment someone feared the dark." But it can show the practical responses that would make sense in a world where darkness mattered. Fire concentrated light and warmth. Shelters softened weather and gave at least one side of the body a boundary. Tools extended the hand. Shared spaces kept people near one another. Repeated occupation turned unknown ground into remembered ground. These are not dramatic inventions. They are the slow grammar of human survival. The beginning of human life was built from such grammar. Before permanent villages, before walls, before streets, before the night could be pushed back by artificial light, people made temporary centres inside a world that remained larger than them. A patch of ash, a circle of stones, a worn floor, cut-marked bones, and scattered tools may seem quiet, but they belong to a long human habit, bringing the world close enough to understand. This is why the night should not be treated only as a feeling. It was also a physical problem, a social problem, and a spatial problem. Where should people rest? How close should bodies remain? How far can someone move after dark? Where is the fuel? Where are the tools? Where are the children? Where does the safe ground end? These questions may not appear as words in the soil, but the remains of human living places remind us that such questions had to be answered again and again. Archaeology also protects the story from becoming too simple. It shows that humans were not merely frightened animals hiding from darkness. They were makers of conditions. They changed what they could. They chose places, carried knowledge, learned from repetition, and used cooperation to reduce risk. The fear of night, if we speak of it carefully, was not blind helplessness. It was an alertness shaped by real limits. It grew from the body's need for light, the group's need for closeness, the child's need for warmth, the mind's need for meaning, and the land's refusal to become fully predictable after sunset. Predators were part of this world, but the evidence points toward a wider truth. Humans did not organize camps only against teeth and claws. They organized themselves against uncertainty itself. They made the dark hours more survivable by making space more human. That may be the strongest thing the material record can suggest. Not that we know exactly what someone felt in one ancient night, but that we can see the shape of repeated answers. Fire here, tools near the hand, bodies close, shelter chosen, food processed, ground reused, a small human order placed inside a larger natural order. The night was not conquered by these answers, it was met by them. It was held at the edge, reduced in small ways, negotiated with until morning. In that careful view, the question becomes deeper. Ancient humans may have feared the night more than predators, not because they misunderstood the world, but because they understood, through daily experience, how much of survival depended on keeping the world readable when darkness tried to take readability away. Modern darkness is not the same darkness ancient humans knew. A room at night is surrounded by walls. A door can be locked. A roof holds back weather. The floor is flat. A bed lifts the body away from the ground. A small light can be turned on in an instant, and a screen can fill the hand with color, voices, maps, messages, and time. In many places, darkness has become something controlled. It can be entered and ended by choice. Yet the body does not always behave as if this is fully true. A person can lie safely in a modern room and still become more alert when the lights go out. The same sound that would be ignored in the afternoon can feel sharper after midnight. A pipe settling, a floorboard shifting, wind touching a window, a faint noise from another room. All can seem to ask for attention. Nothing may be wrong. No predator is waiting. No ancient landscape surrounds the bed. But the body listens as if darkness has changed the rules. This does not mean modern people are secretly living in the past. It means the body carries older ways of responding to reduced information. When light fades, the mind has less visual certainty. Corners become less clear. Distance becomes less immediate. Objects lose detail. The familiar room remains familiar, but it becomes less complete. The body may know perfectly well where the door is, where the wall is, where the floor begins, where the bed ends. Still, for a few moments, the senses do not receive the room with the same fullness. The old pattern appears softly. When vision weakens, listening grows stronger. This response is not foolish. It comes from a nervous system shaped by long histories of attention. For most of human existence, night was not an aesthetic mood or a setting for rest alone. It was a condition that changed movement, safety, distance, and group life. The ancient body could not press a switch and restore the world. It had to wait for dawn, fire, moonlight, or the nearness of others. Modern darkness is cushioned by technology, but the body's basic relationship with uncertainty has not been erased. We still wake more easily to certain sounds. We still feel difference between a sound seen and a sound unseen. We still prefer to know where the edges of a space are before resting deeply. The ancient beginning of human life helps explain this without exaggeration. Humans became highly visual, social, memory-dependent creatures. We learned to read faces, ground, tools, paths, fire, and the behavior of other beings. Darkness reduces some of those readings. Even now, when the stakes are much lower, the body can respond to that reduction. It may tighten slightly. It may pause before crossing a dark room. It may listen after a sound and wait for a second signal. It may feel more comfortable when another person is nearby, when a hallway light remains on, or when the space has been checked before sleep. These small modern habits are not proof that we are afraid in the same way ancient humans were. They are gentler echoes of the same problem. The body rests better when the world feels readable. The difference is that modern life often hides the source of the feeling. We may think the unease is irrational because the room is safe, but the body is not only asking whether the room is statistically safe, it is asking whether the senses have enough information to relax. A dark house, a silent hallway, or an unfamiliar hotel room can briefly disturb that sense of readability. The mind fills in what the eyes cannot confirm. It compares the sound with memory. It waits to see whether the noise repeats. This is a small version of a very old pattern. Ancient humans did not fear the night simply because they lacked courage or knowledge. They feared it because night reduced the information that made courage and knowledge usable. Modern darkness rarely carries the same danger, but it can still touch that older layer. In the quiet after the light goes out, the body may remember a world it never personally lived in, a world where darkness did not only cover the room, but covered the path, the fire's edge, the child nearby, the group's boundary, and the long, uncertain distance until morning. A sound at night can feel strangely personal. During the day, the same sound may disappear into the larger noise of living. A wall settling, a branch touching glass, a distant vehicle, a soft movement in another room, a small knock from pipes or wind, all may pass without much attention. Daylight gives the mind many other things to hold. It gives colour, movement, faces, screens, tasks, and the ordinary confidence that the world is visible enough. But when the room is dark and the body is trying to sleep, one small sound can seem to step forward. It becomes larger not because it is louder, but because there is less around it. The eyes cannot easily explain it. The body is horizontal, slower, partly surrendered. The mind has begun to loosen, yet some older part of attention remains near the surface, asking whether the sound belongs to the known world or to something that has not yet been named. This is where modern darkness still touches the ancient body, not as a direct return to prehistoric life, and not as proof that danger is present, but as a faint continuation of an old rule. An unseen sound carries more uncertainty than a seen one. In a modern home, the explanation is usually harmless. Wood expands or cools, air moves, plumbing shifts, a neighbour closes a door, a pet walks somewhere out of sight, machines settle into silence. The mind can know all of this, and still the body may listen for a second sound. It waits for pattern. Did the noise repeat? Did it move? Did it come from inside or outside? Was it near the door, the window, the floor, the hallway? This waiting is very old in structure. Ancient humans also lived with sounds that required comparison. A sound near the camp might be wind, animal movement, another person, shifting fuel, a child stirring, water stone, or something that needed attention. The body could not know instantly. It had to hold the sound in a small space of caution until more information came. Modern life has lowered the danger, but it has not removed the structure of listening. The nervous system still treats some uncertainty as worth checking. The sound that cannot be seen asks the body to become a little more awake. This is why night sounds can disturb us, even inside safety. They arrive at a time when vision is reduced, action is slower, and the body is preparing for sleep. A sound during the day meets a person who is standing, moving, looking, and surrounded by visible evidence. A sound at night meets a person who has given up some control. The difference is not only outside the body, it is inside posture, attention, and readiness. A person lying down is more vulnerable than a person standing. A person half asleep has less immediate command over the room than a person fully awake. Ancient humans lived this truth more directly. Sleep, darkness, and uncertainty came together in a world without sealed walls or instant light. The group had to use listening carefully because listening was often the first sign that the hidden world had changed. The beginning of human life was shaped by this relationship between sound and survival. Before writing, before electric lamps, before doors that could be locked with metal, people learned from the night by hearing it. They heard insects, wind, animals, water, fire, breathing, footsteps, silence, and change. They learned that not every sound mattered, but some sounds did. That distinction is delicate. If the body reacts to everything, it loses rest. If it reacts to nothing, it may miss warning. So the mind does something subtle. It does not always leap into fear. It listens. It compares. It waits. Even today, that process can continue in a quiet bedroom. The danger may be gone, but the comparison remains. A person hears something, then asks the darkness to explain itself. Often, the explanation arrives. The sound does not repeat. The body settles. Sleep returns. But for a moment, the modern room becomes less modern. It becomes a place where the senses are incomplete, where the mind reaches beyond sight, where the body remembers that certainty is not automatic after dark. This helps explain why ancient humans may have feared the night more than predators. A predator was one possible source of sound. The night was the condition that made many sounds harder to place. It turned listening into a form of survival, and it left a trace of that survival inside us. Even now, when nothing is hunting us, a small sound in the dark can make the body pause, because some ancient part of attention is still waiting for the world to become readable again. The modern body does not live in the same darkness as the ancient body, but it may still carry an older grammar of attention. A person today may sleep behind walls, under a roof, near a locked door, beside a phone, beneath electric light that can return the room in an instant. The danger is not the same. The room is not a riverbank, a cave mouth, a cold clearing, or a temporary camp at the edge of firelight. Yet when darkness removes detail, the body may still become slightly more careful. It may listen before relaxing. It may prefer a familiar room over an unfamiliar one. It may sleep more easily when it knows the shape of the space, when the door is closed, when another person is nearby, or when a faint light gives the eyes a small amount of certainty. These are not signs that the past controls us completely. They are signs that human bodies were shaped through long experience with uncertainty. The old problem was never only darkness itself. It was the loss of readable information. In that sense, the modern unease we sometimes feel after the lights go out is not a direct memory of ancient nights, but a quiet continuation of the same relationship between body and world. The body rests best when the world feels knowable. It settles when the edges are clear enough, when sounds have familiar causes, when the path to safety is understood, when the space around the bed does not feel open, strange, or unfinished. Ancient humans had to create that knowability with fire, group closeness, chosen ground, memory, and repeated habits. Modern humans create it with walls, lamps, doors, locks, routines, and the familiar arrangement of rooms. The tools have changed, but the need beneath them is still recognizable. We want the night to become smaller before we surrender to sleep. This is why fear of the dark should not be treated only as childish or irrational. In many modern situations, the fear may not match the actual danger, but the body is not only calculating danger in a modern way, it is responding to reduced certainty. It is asking whether the space can still be trusted when vision weakens and action slows. For most of human existence, that question mattered. A dark place could hide uneven ground, cold air, distance from the group, movement beyond firelight, or the loss of a path home. The ancient body learned caution not because every shadow was dangerous, but because some shadows could not be dismissed quickly enough. A cautious response did not need to be perfect. It only needed, across many generations, to help bodies pause, listen, gather close, and avoid careless movement when information was thin, that old caution may still appear in softer forms. We hear a noise and wait. We check the door. We turn on a small light. We prefer not to sleep in a place that feels too open. We feel calmer when another breathing body is near. These habits do not prove that ancient humans felt exactly what we feel, but they show that the bridge between modern sleep and ancient night is not broken. It passes through the nervous system, through vision, through sound, through the need for shelter, and through the old comfort of being near others. The beginning of human life was not lived in perfect safety. It was lived in repeated negotiation with limits. Darkness was one of those limits. It reduced sight. It stretched time. It made sound uncertain. It made the group more important. It made children more vulnerable. It made fire precious but incomplete. Modern life has softened these conditions so much that we can forget how powerful they once were. But the body may not forget as quickly as culture changes. The body changes more slowly than houses, lamps, cities, and screens. Somewhere beneath the modern room, there remains a simple ancient preference. Make the space readable. Keep warmth close. Know where the others are, and do not let the dark become too large. This does not mean we should fear the night. It means we can understand the fear more kindly. Night once asked human beings to become careful, social, patient, and aware of what they could not control. Even now, when we lie down in safety, a small part of us may still listen for the world to prove that it is safe enough to let go. Night did not only frighten ancient humans, it may also have helped shape the kind of humans they became. This is a careful idea, because fear is often treated as something only negative, something to overcome or remove. But in the long history of life, fear can also organize attention. It can tell a body to slow down, to stay near others, to listen before moving, to protect what is fragile, to remember what happened before. For ancient humans, the night brought many limits at once. Vision weakened. Distance became harder to trust. Movement became more costly. Sleep made the body vulnerable. Children needed warmth. Fire needed care. The group had to remain close enough for safety, but calm enough for rest. In such conditions, fear was not only a reaction to danger. It was one of the forces that pulled human life inward and made cooperation more necessary. A single person could be alert for a while, but no single person could carry the whole night alone forever. The darkness made this truth visible. It showed that survival was not only a matter of strength, it was also a matter of nearness. Around the edge of firelight, or inside a shelter, or on chosen ground beneath the open sky, human beings had to become a circle. They had to share warmth, share space, share attention, and share memory. The night asked bodies to arrange themselves in ways that reduced exposure. The young near the protected center, the tired given rest. The fire placed where it could help without harming. Tools kept close. Fuel gathered before movement became difficult. Voices lowered, listening sharpened. These ordinary arrangements may seem small, but they are part of the deep architecture of human social life. Before walls became houses, the group itself was a kind of shelter. Before lamps filled rooms, firelight and moonlight made partial worlds. Before written rules, people learned through repeated nights where to sleep, when to move, when to stay still, and why no one should drift too far from the human center. This is why the fear of night should not be imagined only as panic. Much of it may have been quieter than that. It could have been a pressure toward care, a reason to keep a child closer, a reason to notice the breathing of others, a reason to preserve embers, a reason to remember a safer place, a reason to teach the young that darkness changes the meaning of distance. In the beginning of human life, such lessons mattered. Humans became powerful not because they escaped vulnerability, but because they learned to live with it together. Long childhood made care necessary. Upright walking made the ground important. Heavy dependence on vision made darkness meaningful. Social memory made repeated places safer. Fire made a center, but only if people tended it. All of these threads came together at night. The dark hours gathered human weakness into one place, and because of that, they also gathered human strengths. A predator could test the body from outside. Night tested the relationships between bodies. It asked whether the group could remain attentive without exhausting itself. close without disorder, cautious without being ruled by fear. That may be one of the reasons the night became so important in human history. It did not merely threaten survival, it trained survival to become social. The human response to darkness was not only to run from what was hidden, it was to create a place where hidden things had less power, a place of warmth, a place of shared signals, a place where memory could be passed from one person to another, a place where the smallest bodies were not left alone at the edge. Over many generations, this repeated act of gathering may have deepened the habits that make humans human. Reason together, resting together, teaching together, fearing together, and slowly learning that safety is something made between people. The night was still vast. It still held uncertainty, cold, silence, and distance. But inside that vastness, humans learned to make a smaller world that could be held until morning. They did not defeat the dark. They learned to answer it with one another. Fear is often misunderstood because we notice its discomfort before we notice its purpose. It tightens the body. It makes the breath shallow. It narrows attention. It can make a person pause where they might otherwise move. In a modern life, where many dangers are softened by walls, rules, medicine, roads, and light, fear can seem like an unwanted leftover. But in the long human past, fear was not only a burden, it was also a signal. It told the body that the available information was not enough. It asked the mind to slow down before stepping into the dark. It made the group listen a little longer, keep children nearer, guard the fire more carefully, and avoid unnecessary movement when the land could not be read. Ancient humans did not survive by being fearless. A fearless body in the wrong place may walk too far from the group, ignore a strange silence, forget the cold, sleep in exposed ground, or treat a hidden slope as if it were daylight. A careful body, by contrast, may waste some energy through caution, but it may also return to morning more often. This is the quiet usefulness of fear. It does not need to be perfect. It only needs to make survival slightly more likely across many nights, many generations, and many small decisions. The fear of night may have worked in this way. It did not always point to a real predator. It did not always mean danger was present, but it reminded the body that certainty had been reduced. It told people that the world beyond the visible center was not fully known. That message could be valuable. It could keep the group from spreading too far. It could help adults notice the vulnerable. It could make someone tend the fire before it became too weak. It could make the mind remember where the safe ground ended. In the beginning of human life, such caution would not have been separate from intelligence. It was one form of intelligence, carried through the body. Human beings often think with words, but the body also thinks through tension, hesitation, nearness, and alertness. A step slowed by fear may be a step saved from injury. A pause before leaving the firelight may be a way of respecting the limits of vision. A hand reaching for a child in the dark may be the body's answer to thousands of older nights when closeness mattered. Fear becomes harmful when it rules everything. But fear also becomes meaningful when it teaches the body where attention belongs. Ancient night gave fear many places to belong. The edge of camp, the fading ember, the unknown sound, the cold ground, the missing path, the sleeping child, the tired companion, the distance beyond sight. Each of these was not only a danger, each was a reminder that life continued through care. This may be one reason night helped shape human beings rather than simply frightening them. It made fear social. A private fear could become shared attention. One person stiffening at a sound could draw others into listening. One adult noticing a child's movement could protect the whole group's future. One memory of a bad resting place could guide later choices. One cautious habit could become common knowledge. Over time, fear could be transformed into practice. Do not wander too far after dark. Keep warmth near the young. Know where the fuel is. Choose ground before night fully falls. Listen before deciding. Stay close enough to be found. These are not dramatic lessons, but they are human lessons. They turn vulnerability into order. They show how a species without great claws, armor, or night vision could survive by becoming careful together. Predators mattered, but fear of predators alone does not explain the full weight of night. The deeper fear was tied to uncertainty itself. and uncertainty required more than strength. It required patience, memory, cooperation, and restraint. In that sense, the night may have taught humans something that daylight could not teach as deeply. It taught that survival is not only an act of pushing forward. Sometimes survival is the act of staying near, waiting, listening, and accepting that the world cannot always be forced into clarity. A body that fears the dark is not only a frightened body, it may also be a body remembering that life once depended on respecting what could not yet be seen. Perhaps the deepest thing the night gave to human beings was not fear itself, but a question about how to live with what cannot be fully controlled. Darkness returned every evening, no matter how clever the hands became, no matter how carefully a camp was chosen, no matter how strongly a fire burned. It was not defeated once and then gone. It had to be met again and again. This repeated meeting may have taught humans a lesson that still matters. Safety is not the same as total control. Safety is often partial. It is made from attention, nearness, memory, care, and patience. Ancient humans did not need to master the whole night in order to survive it. They needed to make enough of the night livable. A small circle of firelight, a chosen patch of ground, a child kept warm, a tool within reach, a group close enough to hear one another, a memory of where the path returned. These were not perfect answers, but they were human answers. They were ways of saying to the darkness, "We cannot remove you, but we can gather inside you." This may be the quiet value hidden inside the fear of night. It reminded human beings that vulnerability was not a failure. Vulnerability was the condition from which cooperation became necessary. The weak body, the sleeping body, the child's body, the cold body, the lost body, the listening body, all revealed that no human being was complete alone. The night made this truth harder to ignore. In daylight, a person could feel separate and capable, walking under the sun with hands free and eyes reaching far ahead. In darkness, that independence narrowed. The group became more than company. It became a way of extending life beyond the limits of one body. One person's hearing, another person's memory, another person's warmth, another person's care for a child, another person's knowledge of the land, all became part of a shared shelter. The ancient beginning of humanity was shaped by this kind of shared incompleteness. We were never only the animal that made tools, or carried fire, or walked upright, or spoke in symbols. We were also the animal that had to sleep in darkness and remain connected while doing so. The fear of night may have helped keep that connection alive, not by making people panic, but by making them attentive to the edges of safety. Where does the firelight end? Where is the child? Where is the path? Who is awake? Who is cold? What sound belongs to the known world, and what sound asks for care? These questions were practical, but they were also moral in a simple human sense. They turned attention toward others. They made survival more than self-protection. They made the night a place where the group had to remember what it owed to its most vulnerable members. Modern life has changed the night almost beyond recognition. We have walls, roofs, lamps, locks, roads, hospitals, blankets, screens, and clocks. We can flood darkness with light and measure time through the smallest hours. Yet, even now, the body may still understand something older than convenience. It may feel calmer when the room is familiar. It may settle when the door is closed, when a small light remains, when someone trusted is nearby, when a sound is explained, when the space around us feels known. These are gentle, modern echoes of a much older human need. The need is not simply to avoid danger. It is to feel that the world around the body has become readable enough for sleep. That is why the night remains meaningful. It is not only a background for rest, it is a reminder of the ancient border between knowing and not knowing. It shows us that human peace has always depended on more than strength. It has depended on the ability to create small circles of trust inside a world larger than ourselves. Ancient humans may have feared the night more than predators because predators were only one danger within darkness, while darkness changed the meaning of every danger. It took away distance, shape, certainty, and easy return, but it also gave humans a reason to gather, to listen, to protect, to remember, and to wait together for morning. So when the lights go out now, and the room grows quiet, perhaps the old question is still there beneath the calm. What part of the night are we still learning to live with?